Chapter 1151, Might of King Tyr. Wuxia shot out a palm strike, and it was as if the sky had collapsed, and like a star had fallen. Pung! Su Jing was instantly sent flying. Although he had once been praised as a King Tyr in the young generation, showed disdain for his peers, and had even managed to trample all over the elites of the mountain river Tyr from the previous generation, against a true King Tyr, he could only accept his defeat. After all, Wuxia had formed his fifth mountain river, and this was a qualitative domination. He was really too strong. However, it was not that Su Jing did not have a chance to catch up, or even surpass his opponent. As long as he, too, could form his fifth mountain river, anything was possible. But before that, he could only admit his defeat. Senior brother disciple Wu, I, too, would like to ask for your guidance. Xiao Sisi nimbly walked down into the arena. Ling Han couldn't help but feel gloomy. Why did everyone have to fight over the chance to fight with him? Forget it, you guys go ahead. When no one was left to challenge Wuxia, he would make his move. Wuxia looked at Xiao Sisi, a stunned light flashing in his eyes. Beautiful women were a resource, but they were very common. After all, the population of the immortal realm was too large, so a few great beauties could still be found somewhere. However, a beautiful woman that had the three merits of being incredibly talented in martial arts world, having potential to become a King Tyr, and coming from a powerful background was definitely a scarce resource. This beauty in front of him possessed all those merits, so she naturally would make men fall in love with her. It could be claimed that even if her cultivation level was slightly lower, and her natural talent slightly weaker, she could still make many men willingly fall at her feet. Junior sister, please. Wuxia's tone was gentle, exhibiting the tender and kind nature of a senior brother. He Tao smirked coldly. He naturally was aware of Wuxia's true nature. However, he did not believe that Xiao Sisi would be fooled by a few words from Wu Zihao. Could such a lovesick girl be nurtured and prioritized by her clan? Please do not be too strict on me, senior brother disciple. Xiao Sisi bowed delicately, showing off her womanly charms to the fullest. This show of weakness would naturally not engender the disdain of others. Instead, they would only think that she was well-behaved and respectful to her seniors. Their opinion of her would rise accordingly. A great many men were looking at her, captivated. Only Gan Shiyun was spitting internally, because this was a trick that she, too, liked to use. True enough, Wuxia's expression became even more indulgent, and his smile widened as he said, Junior sister, please. Xiao Sisi's hands shook, and she actually drew a long spear. It was as long as 9 meters, and when she wielded it, it added a soldierly yet beautiful air to her bearing. Added with the fact that she was extraordinarily beautiful in the first place, she was even more attractive than before. Even one with Wuxia's mental state could not help but feel his heart throb. The others, who were even more unable to bear it, even swallowed. Go! Xiao Sisi wielded her spear, and began her attack on Wuxia. The spear spat out lightning, and it was like a dragon of lightning, extremely frightening. Wuxia was slightly stunned. Her abilities really could not be underestimated. Whoever thought she only had beauty and was a mere pretty face would be making a serious mistake. The spear pierced towards him, and one lightning bolt after another appeared from the body of the spear. They formed multiple snakes of lightning that spat out the fury of lightning at Wuxia. Quite interesting, Wuxia commented, smiling. If he had not formed his fifth mountain river, then he would really have been flustered by this strike in front of him. This woman could definitely become a formidable opponent to him. However, at present, his abilities were far above hers. Someone who had not formed the fifth mountain river could definitely not imagine how powerful this cultivation level was. He merely pushed out with his right hand. Wang, a navy blue hand of origin power appeared, and grabbed out at the spear. A mighty aura rolled out without bounds, and instantly suppressed Xiao Sisi's own aura. This really was not fearing someone who didn't know what was what, but fearing to be compared. When Xiao Sisi made her move just now, all were shaken. Who would dare to underestimate this woman? But as Wuxia made his own move forcefully, it completely suppressed Xiao Cici's performance. This gap was really not just a little bit. Boom! The giant hand fell, and the spear's course was suddenly blocked. Then, it actually twisted as if it could not endure the massive pressure, and was about to break at any moment from the force. Xiao Cici gave a soft shout, and endless flashes of lighting surged all over her body, her power spiking suddenly. Junior sister's abilities and talent are extremely impressive. Unfortunately, there is still a large gap between you and me. Without forming your fifth mountain river, you are ultimately still immortal. Wuxia stretched out a hand and pushed at empty air. The might of that large hand abruptly rose further, and forcefully pushed back at Xiao Cici. A frightening power attacked, and Xiao Cici hurriedly shook her right hand. The spear actually broke apart by itself. However, it was not broken, but had rather formed a shield in front of her, blocking this attack from Wuxia. So it seemed that her spear had not been forged out from a single piece of godly metal, but rather had been formed from innumerable small chains locking together. It could change form according to her will. Xiao Cici's right hand waved, and the shield once again formed a spear, which she brandished towards Wuxia. Ha ha ha. Wuxia laughed loudly, not worried in the slightest. The large hand continued to fall, and suppressed Xiao Cici to the point that she had no choice but to admit her defeat in just a few moves. Duan, Luo Jingren, Xia Wuk, and the others walked down into the arena to challenge him in succession, but they were all easily defeated by Wuxia, who showed the might of a king tier to the fullest. As expected of senior brother disciple Wu, he is too strong. So one could really form the fifth mountain river in the mountain river tier. I have always thought that this was a mere rumor. No wonder senior brother disciple Wu can become a king tier. After he formed the fifth mountain river, he could practically be considered to have achieved the sun-moon tier. It is a definite one-sided domination over other mountain river tier cultivators. I don't know if there is anyone who could take 10 moves from senior brother disciple Wu. What a joke. Have you seen any mountain river tier cultivator being able to take 10 moves from a sun-moon tier elite? It is definitely impossible. Everyone was filled with praise, and did not hide their admiration for Wuxia. Indeed, it was really too difficult to form the fifth mountain river. Yet Su Jing merely hummed quietly, and said, "If it is merely a question of taking 10 moves, I feel that there is one person who is completely capable of accomplishing that." Xiao Cici's eyes lit up immediately, and quipped, "That's right." Duan nodded as well, and said, "If that person was able to come, then there really would be a possibility that he could force senior brother disciple Wu to use more than 100 moves." Everyone was shocked. Who would they be speaking of that had managed to obtain the unanimous admiration of a few seed-level prodigies? "Oh, and who is this person?" Wuxia asked with a smile, but there was a sliver of disdain in the depths of his gaze. What a joke! Without forming the fifth mountain river, who would be able to be a match for him? Ling Han. Xiao Cici, Duan, Su Jing, and the others replied simultaneously. Perhaps the battle wouldn't be resolved even with 100 moves, it may have to be dragged to more than 1,000 moves. Even Xia Wuk spoke up. It was slightly unexpected that he would actually have such a high opinion of Ling Han. Wuxia couldn't help but get irritated. The battle wouldn't be resolved even with 1,000 moves. What kind of jokes were they spouting? The Rain Emperor and Ding Ping shared a look. One broke into a slight smile, while the other was incredibly proud. Oh, and who could this Ling Han be that he would be described so amazingly by junior sister and junior brother disciples? Why have I not seen him come to the sect? Wuxia asked. Xiao Cici shook her head, and replied, "When the large galactic tomb opened, he had entered with us. He even agreed to reunite with us in the majestic heaven sect, but I never thought that there would be no signs of him after our last meeting. This is really odd." Ha 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 ha. All of a sudden, a few seeds laughed loudly. The conversation had carried on for so long, and that person they spoke of hadn't even managed to enter the sect. Was he even qualified to be considered a prodigy? Chapter 1152, Who is Ling Han? What are you laughing at? Hu Feiyun leaped out. Ling Han is the most awesome, the very strongest. Everyone was astonished. They had not expected yet another person to speak up for Ling Han. They were all seeds here. What seed-level prodigy was not proud and arrogant? Yet Ling Han himself had not even appeared, but had already engendered the extreme admiration of several seeds. This was really unimaginable. They became curious as well, wanting to see this mysterious man. How powerful exactly was this man, and how charismatic was he? Yet flames of jealousy were ignited in Wuxia's heart because these two extreme beauties, Hu Feiyun and Xiao Sisi, had shown a fondness for Ling Han. Hu Feiyun was even more so. She looked like she would come to blows with anyone who dared to speak badly of Ling Han. And this man had not even been qualified to enter into the majestic heaven sect. He was very displeased. Just think, as one of the 6 king tiers, usually, innumerable female disciples in the sect would throw themselves at him. However, his whole heart was concentrated on cultivation, so he had completely no interest in them. It was so rare that he had seen there were a few extremely beautiful women among the seeds this time, yet all of them exhibited great admiration for another man. Damn it. He had better not meet this Ling Han in future, or he would definitely beat him to death. What a joke. Since he is as powerful as you senior disciples claim, why had he not been recruited by the sect? A youth in green asked coldly. It was precisely Fu Lianye, who had been struck back by a sword light from Ling Han several days ago during the selection for followers. At this moment, his hand was still wrapped in bandages. Though that was merely a casual sword light from Ling Han, his martial intent was contained within. How could it be so easily expelled? Without expelling the martial intent, this wound would not heal. The way I see it, he is just a piece of trash. Everything is mere boasting, he said disdainfully. Rubbish. Ding Ping jumped out immediately. Pointing at Fu Lianye, he exclaimed, apologize now. And what relation do you have with this matter? Fu Lianye did not dare be careless. Though this youth had been defeated by Lan Wan, his abilities themselves were incredibly powerful and forceful. He might not have a good chance of winning. Because Ling Han is my master. Ding Ping said with utmost seriousness. Without Ling Han, he wouldn't be where he was now. To Ding Ping, Ling Han was truth. One word from Ling Han, and he would even dare to brandish his fists at a saint, so how could he allow others to speak badly of Ling Han? Ah! Everyone experienced a great shock. Instantly, Ling Han's image was heightened endlessly. Someone who could nurture a seed-level disciple. How amazing was that? Fight me! Ding Ping shouted loudly. His fury soared high, and there were multiple flashes of divine light exuding from all over his body. He was much, much stronger than when he usually was. Huh! Ling Han was surprised. This disciple of his was really extraordinary. Could it be that with his fury, he was about to have an explosive burst of energy? Or could it be that he had awakened some ancient battle prowess, so he could push his battle prowess to a new height? Fu Lianye humphed coldly, and declared, I am in the medium extreme, and I can't be bothered to bully you. Firstly, he was not sure that he could defeat Ding Ping, and secondly, his arm was still injured, so his battle prowess was far from his prime condition, so he was naturally afraid to do battle. In case he lost, and lost to an opponent in a lower cultivation level, what face would he have left? Ding Ping still wanted to challenge him further when he saw the Rain Emperor leap out. The latter pressed a hand on his shoulder and shook his head at him. Ding Ping could only give up his idea. He was his second uncle, and with the absence of his master, he naturally had to obey the words of his second uncle. I, too, am in the medium extreme, so if I battle you, it would not be considered bullying you, right? The Rain Emperor asked in a deep voice. Fuck. Fu Lianye felt baffled. Didn't he just speak a few bad words about a person that no one had seen before? Actually, it couldn't even be considered bad words. Wasn't that just stating the facts as they were? Why was it that it seemed like he had punched a hole into the sky, with endless troubles following on his heels. All of them wanted to challenge him. "And what relation do you have with that Ling Han?" he asked. He was even more cautious with the Rain Emperor. He had witnessed the latter's abilities, and even Wuxia was forced into a continuous retreat after he suppressed his cultivation level, and even was not capable of fighting back at one point. Fighting with Ding Ping, he still had a chance of winning, but if he battled with the Rain Emperor, he did not even have the slightest confidence he could win. The Rain Emperor brandished his fist and replied, "Ling Han is my fourth brother." Pooh! Everyone was once again shocked. The disciple was a seed, the brother was also a seed. Your whole family had to be monsters, right? That was a little too strong, wasn't it? "Come fight me," the Rain Emperor called out severely. Fu Liangye's expression changed drastically, but no matter how confident he was in himself, he did not dare battle with the Rain Emperor, what more when he was currently still injured. However, he was the kind that could go with the flow, and immediately said, "I have not chosen my words well," and was rude and impetuous. So he had yielded. Making a seed-level genius yield and apologize in public was a humiliation, but compared to being defeated in public, this was definitely much better. Hence, Fu Liangye had still made a wise decision. Only then did the Rain Emperor nod and return to his initial position where he sat back down. How domineering! As everyone watched, they could not help but develop an impression of the Rain Emperor. Though this man's cultivation level and abilities were not at the pinnacle, that domineering air was truly intimidating. There were definitely not many that could match him in this place. Wuxia's expression looked slightly ugly. At first, he had already taken control of the atmosphere, and everything had been centered on him. He'd been the only focal point, but now? His spotlight had been snatched away by a person that had not even been seen before. "Senior brother disciple Wu, you have fought so many rounds, so you should take some rest, and let me have the stage." A young man in white jumped out, wearing a dazzling smile on his face. "Junior brother Zhang." Wuxia's gaze jumped to him, and a sliver of caution appeared in his eyes. This person's name was Zhang Long. In the past, he had been equally famous as he. Their battle prowess was equally matched, but 100 years ago, Wuxia took a crucial step and formed his fifth mountain river. Zhang Long, however, had not succeeded even until now, and the gap between the two of them was rapidly enlarged. But Wuxia did not take this Zhang Long lightly, because the latter's talent was really no worse than his own. It could only be said that he was not as fortunate, and that was why he had kept failing. But, who knew when Zhang Long would advance into the pinnacle level, and become capable of being on equal footing with him? Wuxia thought for a moment and stepped back with a nod, letting him have the stage. "Ho, then I shall let junior brother Zhang have it." He had already exhibited enough of his power, and there was no need for him to continue showing off. Too far was as bad as not enough. Zhang Long's eyes swept over the masses. His eyes were obviously very gentle, but anyone who became the target of his gaze felt coldness rise up from the bottom of their heart as if they were being targeted by a venomous snake. Involuntarily, they lowered their heads, and dared not look him in the eye. He was an elite, and even if he hadn't formed his fifth mountain river, he was more or less as powerful. He had powerful abilities that could crush all his peers. Finally, his eyes stopped on Ling Han. "Junior brother disciple, how about we spar?" he asked, issuing his own challenge. Everyone was surprised. Zhang Long actually wanted to challenge Ling Han. It should be known that Zhang Long had not entered into the Majestic Heavens sect just over a year ago, but had been in the sect since 900 years ago. In such a great sect, he had been trained for 900 years. Even if he had not formed his fifth mountain river, his power would definitely surpass that of any ordinary cultivator in the peak stage of the mountain river tier. Gan Shiyun smirked icily. She had sacrificed a high-grade godly metal in exchange for Zhang Long's undertaking of this task. She wanted to teach Ling Han a harsh lesson, and cause him to be humiliated publicly. Chapter 1153, Let you have the first 3 moves. "Junior brother Han, do you dare battle me?" Zhang Long asked calmly. He had indeed received a piece of high-grade godly metal from Gan Shiyun, but this was not the reason that he was willing to move. He was willing to move because he enjoyed trampling over the pride of geniuses, and the more of a genius they were, the happier he was. Ling Han stood up and said, "Since you are asking to be defeated, I will naturally oblige." How boastful this guy was. They hadn't even battled yet, and he already thought that he would win. Wasn't he afraid that he would be smacked in the face by reality if he went too far and was too confident in his words? Zhang Long's expression darkened, and said, "I entered the sect 900 years before you did, so you should respectfully address me as senior brother." Who is the senior brother, and who is the junior brother? Shouldn't it be decided by abilities? Ling Han asked calmly. If I advance into the Sun-Moon tier someday, junior brother Zhang would still have to address me as milord. Fuck, his self-confidence was really full to burst. Everyone shook their heads. Though Ling Han was indeed very strong, having defeated Gan Shiyun before even entering the sect, Gan Shiyun had only entered the sect for over a year, after all. Hence, her abilities would be limited. Zhang Long, however, was completely different. He had already been in the sect for 9 centuries, and had been taught many secret techniques of the sect. Though he had not formed his 5th mountain river, he definitely had to have cultivated mountain river tier to perfection. Below the 5th mountain river, he should be invincible. Haha. Zhang Long laughed coldly. You are very arrogant, but I like opponents like you, for I can trample all over you. You would become cut and bruised all over, and be thoroughly discredited. Could it be that you don't worry that you might be the one who would be stomped into the ground, and be so ashamed that you would not be able to show your face? Ling Han shook his head. This joke is not the slightest bit amusing. Zhang Long humphed. I was not joking. Ling Han strove to be contrary. Zhang Long's expression became colder and colder. With a wave of his hand, he declared, "Then come fight. On the basis that you entered the sect earlier than I will let you have the first 3 moves." Ling Han placed his arms behind his back. Arrogance. Zhang Long was furious, and suddenly charged at Ling Han in attack. Boom! Though he had not formed his 5th mountain river tier, he had polished his cultivation in mountain river tier to the pinnacle. His origin power was incredibly dense, and as he attacked, it was as if the sky itself was pressing down, having the forceful and invincible bearing of mountain river tier. Ling Han's feet moved, and he calmly retreated, dodging his opponent's attack by a hair's breadth. Boom! 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 The 3 moves were delivered, and Ling Han had indeed dispersed all the attacks without even fighting back. Gasp! Everyone was stunned. This was slightly strong. Previously, Zhang Long's abilities had already been analyzed. Aside from the 6 king tiers, who else could confidently say they could let Zhang Long have the first 3 moves here? But Ling Han did not only say these words, he also did as he said. This man's abilities were deep and unmeasurable. Even Wuxia and He Tao looked slightly surprised. They had not thought that Ling Han would be so powerful. I have already let you have the first 3 moves, so I might as well handicap myself by using only 1 arm as well. Ling Han continued to place his right arm behind his back, and merely waved his left arm. This. Aren't you looking down on your opponent too much? That was Zhang Long. Gan Shiyun was shocked, but also pleased internally at the same time. This time, Ling Han had really offended Zhang Long to the fullest. Now, even without her saying so, Zhang Long would definitely be more than pleased to get rid of Ling Han. Good, very good. She did not believe that with Zhang Long's abilities, he would still be unable to defeat Ling Han. If that was so, the seed-level genius he was and the 900 years of cultivation he had after entering the sect would have been a complete waste of time. Zhang Long seethed in anger. He was truly angered now. Letting his opponent have the first 3 moves, handicapping oneself by using just 1 arm. These should have been his lines. But now, he was treated in this manner by a junior. This caused him to feel greatly humiliated. Junior brother, you've asked for this. His eyes were sinister and cold. All of a sudden, a blood-red flash appeared. His skin instantly became blood-red, and his body suddenly swelled. Pa. The fabric on his arms was immediately torn forcefully, revealing 2 furry clawed paws. That was right. They were not arms, but rather tiger-like legs with claws. His 2 arms had currently turned into clawed tiger paws, and there were close to 70 divine patterns flickering on them, exuding a blood-red halo. Hiss, what kind of secret technique is this? Why do I feel like Zhang Long's abilities had surpassed the level of the Mountain River tier? Someone exclaimed in surprise. He was obviously a seed-level genius, yet had already turned pale from the aura that Zhang Long was exuding now. No, it hasn't surpassed the Mountain River tier. The reason why you feel this way is because your cultivation level is still a bit too low. This is a strange technique that senior brother Zhang has cultivated. It is called Absolute Great Blood Tiger Technique. The moment he uses it, his power and speed would be increased greatly. Senior brother Zhang has already cultivated the Mountain River tier to the peak stage in the first place, so his power could surpass 6 stars. And now, added with the Absolute Great Blood Tiger Technique, it is very possible his power could leap into 7 stars. That would be the power of the pinnacle level. Some senior brothers who had entered the sect earlier explained Zhang Long's current condition. He had not formed his 5th Mountain River tier, yet he had broken through the pinnacle of the 4 minor levels of Mountain River tier with other means. However, secret techniques would still have a limited duration, unlike truly forming 5 mountain rivers, which would be a permanent increase in power. Furthermore, did forming 5 mountain rivers mean that he wouldn't be able to cultivate a secret technique? Zhang Long shouted fiercely, and brandished his clawed hand in an attack at Ling Han. Xiao! He was too fast. He seemed to have transformed into a bloody flash, so fast that the majority of the cultivators in the consummate level of Mountain River tier could not even catch his movement. Pung! They saw Ling Han move. His right hand flicked, and delivered a flash of sword chi. This strike was so fast it had reached the peak. Hong, their attacks clashed, forming a brilliant explosion, and causing the majority of people to become blind even when they had their eyes open. They were completely unable to see how the battle had progressed. However, the brightness soon vanished. They saw that Ling Han was still standing proudly in the center of the arena, his right arm leveled out. His forefinger and middle finger had joined together to form a sword. There was a weak sword light flickering around it. Zhang Long, though, had collapsed at Ling Han's feet, his face facing upwards. There was blood gushing out of his chest. What? Someone as strong as Zhang Long had been defeated with a single move? Everyone watched with wide eyes, even their breathing had stagnated. How could that be possible? This was completely impossible. Some of them even wanted to shout in astonishment as they held their heads. They felt that they must have seen it wrong, and understood things wrong. It must have been Zhang Long who had defeated Ling Han with a single move. However, when they closed and opened their eyes again, there was still not the slightest change in the scene. Zhang Long was lying on the ground, completely unconscious. Defeat, utter and complete defeat. Ling Han sent Zhang Long back to the rock he had originally been on with a kick. The force he had used in this kick was ingenious. It just sent Zhang Long to lie face down on the rock, his behind facing upwards as his arms hung on either side. That image would definitely remain in everyone's memories forever. Gan Shiyun only felt coldness rise from deep within. Ling Han's strength had completely exceeded her expectations. He had defeated even Zhang Long so easily. Could it be that he had formed his 5th mountain river? That was really a moat to the heavens. Even a super sect the likes of the majestic Heaven sect, which had gathered the most brilliant geniuses from over 100 planets, still merely had 6 king tiers at present. This kind of genius would definitely be treated like a great treasure by the sect. How could she possibly have any hope for vengeance, then? Ling Han looked coldly at her. The fact that Zhang Long chose to challenge him alone was obviously not unrelated to Gan Shiyun. Gan Shiyun merely felt as if her soul itself trembled. She hurriedly lowered her gaze, not daring to meet Ling Han's eyes. Ho ho, I really did not imagine that junior brother Han would be so strong. Wuxia praised, smiling as he clapped his hands, a strong glint of wariness in his eyes. He did not dare to underestimate even Zhang Long, because it was highly possible that the latter would form the fifth mountain river, and once again catch up to him. Then, wasn't this man that had defeated Zhang Long even more frightening? Ling Han broke into a smile, and asked, Brother Wu, could you give me some guidance? Chapter 1154, Junior Brother Wu. Though Brother Wu and Senior Brother Wu were different by only one word, the meaning each address represented was completely different. Senior Brother Wu was a kind of respectful address from one who admitted his own abilities were no match for his. As for Brother Wu, that was a polite address from one who absolutely did not think he was weaker than him. It was just like He Tao and Wuxia, who would address each other as brother, and neither would address the other as senior brother. As for those who referred to themselves as senior brother, that was because they thought that they were stronger, so how could they possibly lower their own standing? But that was He Tao and Wuxia, two of the 6 king tiers. Was he, Ling Han, qualified to do the same? Wuxia's face involuntarily darkened, and a hint of displeasure appeared on it. Did this brat think that he could challenge him just because he had defeated Zhang Long? He was wary of Zhang Long, but that was not because of his present abilities, but rather his potential. In future, the latter might possibly be on equal grounds with himself. If it was in terms of abilities, he was naturally capable of crushing Zhang Long. Forming the fifth mountain river was a qualitative boost. Meanwhile, He Tao smiled slightly. He was still using divine flames to boil tea, appearing to be very serene. Junior Brother Han, you seem to be a little too arrogant. Wuxia said icily. Junior Brother Wu, I think that you had better address me as senior brother. That way, even if you lost, it would be logical, Ling Han countered with a smile. Pooh. The others were gaping with their mouths wide open. They had already known that Ling Han was very arrogant, but had never thought that he would be so direct. All of them were seeds of the majestic heaven sect, so why did he have to go so far with his actions? If he lost this battle, then would he still be able to stay in the sect? Who would dare befriend him after he became the target of Wuxia, one of the 6 king tiers? Would Ling Han be able to win? Besides diehard fans like Hu Feiyun, practically no one would believe that Ling Han would be able to win over Wuxia. Even if Ling Han had just beaten Zhang Long, Wuxia had defeated Su Jing, Duan, and such extreme geniuses. Furthermore, as one of the 6 king tiers, this glory was enough to fill others with absolute belief in him. In the sect, no one could challenge the position of the 6 king tiers. Nobody understood. Why did Ling Han seem to have a grudge against Wuxia to actually oppose him in this manner? They had indeed not guessed wrongly. Ling Han was a man who was too protective of his own. Wuxia had previously played a trick on the Rain Emperor, so how could Ling Han pretend like he had not seen it? He was naturally going to avenge this loss. Junior Brother Han, you are really quite interesting. Wuxia's whole face was livid. He stretched out his right hand, and wang, it immediately turned pure gold in color like it was forged from divine metal. There was a vague feeling of transparency to it. The last few times he had fought, he had been very casual, but now, he had already used a powerful move even though the battle had not begun. It was naturally because he was truly angered. Of course, the other reason was that Ling Han was strong enough as he had defeated Zhang Long with a single move. Even Wuxia would not dare be careless with power like Ling Han's. Ling Han similarly did not dare underestimate this opponent. The trick he'd played on the Rain Emperor was one matter, but Wuxia's abilities could not be refuted just on the basis of that. Ling Han's physique was enough to make him invincible, but he did not want to use that kind of method to defeat his opponent. He was trying to get justice for the Rain Emperor, so he naturally had to obtain a satisfying victory. Junior Brother Wu is not the slightest bit interesting, though, not calling me senior brother nicely. What are you being so stubborn for? Ling Han said, smiling. Have you had enough? Wuxia roared angrily. Wang, this shout turned solid, creating a visible sound wave. They could see a golden ripple roll out in all directions. Pang, 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 pang. At least half of the spectators fell off their rocks. The might of one shout was actually that powerful. Everyone was astonished. Wuxia probably hadn't shown even 30% of his true abilities so far. Oh no, how was Ling Han going to block it? Ling Han stood proudly, and as the sound wave swept over him, it only caused his robes to flutter and his hair to wave slightly. How could it have possibly hurt him? He calmly said, "It is not decided by who has the louder voice. No matter how loud you shout, junior brother would still be junior brother, and it cannot be changed." You! Wuxia had almost gone mad in rage. He pounced out. In the end, he could not stop himself from taking the initiative to attack Ling Han. Theoretically, the senior brother would have to make an allowance of 1 or 2 moves in this kind of spar, and this was also why he had not made his move just now when he had obviously been in a thunderous rage. That was because he wanted to conduct himself with dignity as per his status, but now, he had been so angered by Ling Han that he had forgotten all that. He only wanted to trample all over this despicable guy. However, he was truly powerful, incredibly powerful, even. Cultivating the 5th mountain river was the pinnacle level. Innumerable rays of golden light descended from the skies, forming multiple sharp blades that slashed down on Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out his right hand, and formed a barrier above his head. A frightening amount of origin power boiled, exuding an aura that was not the slightest bit weaker than Wuxia's. Pang, 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 pang. The golden blades fell, but not one was able to penetrate Ling Han's barrier of origin power. And at this moment, Wuxia himself had also already arrived. His punch landed like a great star falling down, causing the heaven and earth themselves to pale in comparison. Ling Han's competitive spirit burned, and he similarly raised a fist to receive the others with an attack of his own. Pang! The 2 fists collided, and instantly, a brilliant, blinding light was created. A shock wave rippled out. Those who had just sat back down were once again sent flying. This time was even worse as they fell off the mountain peak. Thankfully, the mountain peak was not tall. Hence, they merely fell a short distance before reaching the ground. The collision of fists of Wuxia and Ling Han had not ended. The 2 sides were exerting power, wanting to cause the other to collapse. Zizizi, endless power appeared in the form of light, continuously asterisk, and the deafening noise was like a heavenly tribulation, and also like the heavens collapsing. Pang! Finally, the 2 of them trembled, and ended this clash of fists. Wuxia was bounced back, and landed safely with a somersault, whereas Ling Han retreated slightly for 7 steps before regaining his balance. Who got the upper hand? They couldn't really understand what they were seeing. It seemed to have been a draw. Ling Han frowned slightly. He had just broken through to the pinnacle level, after all. In terms of mere power, the other was just that slight bit superior to him, but the gap was not too large. Then, in a situation where the power of both sides was about the same, it would have to depend on who had the stronger secret technique, and whose natural talent in battle was higher. Wuxia's expression instantly became incredibly serious, and he said, "No wonder you were so arrogant, so it turns out that junior brother Han has also cultivated to the pinnacle level." What? Everyone felt their hair rise on ends. This aggressive guy had actually also formed the 5th mountain river? No wonder he had been able to challenge Wuxia. The 2 of them had already stood on the true peak of mountain river tier. Then, let us battle with our fullest. Wuxia shouted loudly, stretching out both arms. They were actually stretching continuously, becoming thinner, and turned into 2 golden blades. The blades were covered with divine patterns all over, and if one counted, there were as many as 79 of them. He gave a large shout, and charged over at Ling Han. His 2 blade arms were brandished continuously, shooting out terrifying flashes of sword chi. Ling Han did not take it lying down. Using his 2 fingers like he would a sword, he ran forwards to receive the attack. Ding, 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 ding. They clashed endlessly. They were obviously mere bodies of blood and flesh, yet in their clash, the sounds of metals colliding with one another was heard, causing others to gasp. To what freakish extent had these two people cultivated their physique? But none would be as apprehensive as Wuxia. Chapter 1155, Unleashing Trump Cards. Wuxia was naturally aware that he could only transform his arm into a divine sword because of the cultivate that he practiced. However, he couldn't channel this cultivation technique forever. If he channeled it for too long, his body would be irreparably damaged. Meanwhile, it didn't seem like Ling Han was channeling any cultivation technique at all. It was as if his physique was innately as powerful as godly metal. This is far too terrifying. Do such freaks really exist in the world? He took a deep breath. The might of his opponent was a bit beyond his expectations. He waved his arm sword, and roared, "Heavens above and netherworld beneath, slay all the countless heroes in the world." Boom! Sword light burst from his body, and his aura instantly soared to a new height. I am the sword. He launched a flurry of attacks at Ling Han, each of his strikes bold and powerful. He wished to defeat Ling Han with his supreme sword intent. Ling Han met Wuxia's attacks with his finger. Since his opponent wasn't using a god tool, he wouldn't use his divine demon sword either. He was going to overwhelm his opponent in every single aspect and leave him with no room for excuses. Suppress him. Ling Han unleashed his divine patterns of gravity to affect his Wuxia's movements. They were at the same cultivation level right now, so Wuxia couldn't avoid the fate of being affected. The only difference was how much he was affected. He staggered forward before immediately regaining his balance and continuing his attack on Ling Han. Ling Han chuckled, and continued to unleash his divine patterns of gravity as he blocked Wuxia's attacks with his finger. Although his divine patterns of gravity only had minimal effects, even the smallest of effects were of great significance in a battle between elites. Indeed, Wuxia was extremely annoyed by the divine patterns of gravity. Although they had little effect on him, they would cause his attacks to veer slightly off course every single time. This ticked him off immensely. During battle, one's mental state was especially important. However, Wuxia's battle prowess was elevated to a new height after he unleashed one of his most powerful techniques, and it seemed as if he were about to turn the tables on and suppress Ling Han. Ling Han's pride was also like a raging fire, and he used his fingers like a sword as he activated his divine patterns of flame. Roaring flames instantly burst to life on his right hand. These weren't ordinary flames, but rather flames that had been formed from the regulations of the Great Tao. These were flames that could incinerate even godly metal. Wuxia frowned deeply. Even he felt pressure in front of these divine flame. His opponent looked much younger than him, so how could he engrave so many regulations of the Great Tao in his body? He couldn't lose. Wuxia's fighting spirit soared into the sky. He was one of the 6 King's Tier prodigies, so how could he lose to others? Being defeated by the other 5 King Tiers was not an option either. After all, if he lost, how could he still maintain an equal status with the other King Tiers? Duo. He roared in a low voice, and the sound waves of his roar transformed into a sword that slashed toward Ling Han. Ling Han casually swung a fist at this sword. Pa! The sound wave sword exploded into pieces. However, a sharp pain instantly stabbed at his mind. Huh! Spiritual attack? Ling Han couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. Who would have thought that the sound wave attack was only a facade? The true attack had actually turned out to be a spiritual attack. However, his opponent would never guess that he had already cultivated his divine sense to an extremely powerful level. It had been tempered by the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, so, like his physique, it was one minor level stronger than his current cultivation level. What? A look of shock finally appeared on Wuxia's face when he saw that his spiritual attack had been ineffective. He had unleashed the perishing shock wave just then, which was an extremely profound spiritual attack technique. In fact, it was one of the majestic heaven sect's secret techniques. He had only been taught this technique because he had reached the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier. If one didn't reach the pinnacle level, this technique wouldn't be taught to them, regardless of how prodigious they were. Ling Han had only just entered the sect, so of course he hadn't been taught the perishing shock wave yet. Anyhow, even if he had learned it, it would only elevate the offensive ability of his divine sense, not the defensive ability. Wuxia had roared to cover up his spiritual attack, and his opponent had taken the full brunt of this attack. However, he had come out of it completely unscathed. This was unbelievable. What kind of freak is he? Ling Han cracked a grin and said, "That was a fairly good surprise attack. I'll give you 9 out of 10. I've deducted 1 point to prevent you from becoming too arrogant." Fuck. Do you really think you're my senior brother? Wuxia's expression became icy, and he finally retrieved a god tool. It was a slightly damaged sword. However, it was radiating an ancient and profound aura. 3 clouds, 3 flower sword, he said solemnly. 3 clouds, 3 flower sword, someone shouted in astonishment. That's an inherited precious treasure of the Wu clan. According to rumors, this is a sword that was used by the ancient ancestor of the Wu clan. Both he and his sword perished during his final battle, yet the precious sword absorbed the ancient ancestor's soul. As such, one can comprehend the sword intent of the Wu clan's ancient ancestor if they cultivate with this sword. At that time, the Wu clan's ancient ancestor was a supreme elite at the heavenly body tier. According to legends, he was a freakish talent who could even exchange a few blows with Eternal River tier elites. No wonder senior brother Wu's sword intent is so powerful. It's because he received the inheritance of the 3 clouds, 3 flower sword. This wasn't a replica, and it was the genuine 3 clouds, 3 flower sword. You should be proud that you've forced me to use the 3 clouds, 3 flower sword. Wuxia said. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, regardless of what you do, you still won't be able to avoid defeat. It's not a good habit to make such bold claims. Be careful of slapping your own face. Wuxia leaped forward, slashing with his sword as he did so. Countless clouds and flowers materialized in the air. Ling Han felt as if he had been drawn into another world, one that was brimming with clouds and flowers. However, if he moved even just a little bit, these clouds and flowers would exude a terrifying and wicked killing intent. Every step was thorny, and every step was dangerous. However, Ling Han was unafraid. Even if this genuinely was a high-grade god tool, how powerful it was would still depend on who was wielding it. Although Wuxia had formed 5 mountains and rivers, it was clear that he still hadn't reached the true pinnacle yet. Thus, it was impossible for him to possess power at the Sun-Moon tier's level. Meanwhile, Ling Han's physique determined that he would definitely have the last laugh. The only question was whether he won easily or won with some difficulty. He moved his right hand and retrieved the divine demon sword. A murderous aura instantly soared into the sky. This was devouring metal, a metal that could evolve into divine metal in the future. Even though its current level was still low, it possessed immense potential. Moreover, it had been tempered by several heavenly tribulations, and thus it was engraved with Ling Han's comprehension of Tao. One was engraved with its wielder's Tao, while the other was a damaged weapon used by someone tens of thousands of years ago. How could their affinity with their owner be the same? A brilliant light instantly burst from the divine demon sword, appearing tremendously mighty and astounding. The Rain Emperor and Ding Ping immediately sprang up, a look of excitement on their faces. They naturally guessed Ling Han's identity upon seeing him retrieve the divine demon sword. They also understood why he had stepped forward to challenge Wuxia. This was because Wuxia had wounded the Rain Emperor, and his tactics had more so been sly and shady. With Ling Han's personality of protecting his own people, how could he let such a matter slide? Their swords clanged together, and their martial intent collided violently. Strands of divine patterns materialized in the air and transformed into chains of regulations that fluttered in the sky. If the 3 clouds 3 flower sword were in its original condition, Ling Han's divine demon sword would have been no match for it. After all, it was still just a seedling that was far from fulfilling its potential of becoming divine metal. However, the Three Clouds Three-Flower sword was damaged, and it would have been a block of useless metal had it not fused together with the soul of the Wu clan's ancient ancestor. Now, however, it was evenly matched with the divine demon sword. Chapter 1156, Suppressed in All Aspects. Ling Han nodded in his mind. The inherent high quality of the divine demon sword was finally displaying its might. It was a god tool that had the potential to become divine metal, after all, so how could it not be powerful? Ling Han didn't need to control his sword at all, as it was already fully engraved with his martial intent. He could manipulate it with just a thought, and doing so would be no different from wielding it with his hands. This was a terrifying notion. This sword was equivalent to a separate body of Ling Han, so when it teamed up with him, just how overwhelming would his battle prowess become? Wuxia instantly regretted summoning his god tool. Neither of them had summoned their god tool just then, and he hadn't been at a disadvantage either. It was just that he didn't have an opportunity to attain victory yet. However, it was because of his strong desire to achieve victory that he summoned his Three Clouds Three-Flower sword. He wanted to end the battle as soon as possible, and thus reaffirm his dignity as a senior brother. However, who would have imagined that his opponent's god tool would be just as powerful as his? Moreover, it had an incredible affinity with Ling Han. It was as if it had been nurtured by him. This made him feel very miserable. This was really a case of going out for wool and coming back shorn. Had screwed himself over. Ling Han's heart and spirit were both linked to the divine demon sword, and thus the divine demon sword was able to channel his sword Dao as it slashed toward Wuxia. Meanwhile, Ling Han also swung his fists at Wuxia. This was the second path that he wanted to take. The sword Dao was his first choice. In any case, it would be a waste not to take the path of the sword Dao since he already owned a god tool like the divine demon sword. However, he also wanted to take the path of the unarmed combat Dao. He had cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, and his physique was so powerful that he could be viewed as a human weapon. He possessed the Nine Dragons tyrant body art on top of that, and this technique allowed him to wield an endless power. Thus, he was extremely suited to close combat. His fists, legs, elbows, and even head could all be used as deadly weapons. Boundless divine light radiated from the divine demon sword, and Ling Han's fists were also raging with divine flames as they rained down on his opponent. Similar to the Rain Emperor, he was exuding an incredibly mighty and domineering aura. He would crush whoever stood in his way. Wuxia was unwilling to yield. He felt that Ling Han was far too overconfident. Generally speaking, people would only attack in such a manner if their power was far greater than that of their opponent. If one swung their fists wildly as Ling Han did, they would suffer greatly if they came across an opponent who was slightly more powerful. Wuxia roared in anger as he used his sword to parry the divine demon sword. At the same time, his left hand also balled into a fist, and he punched at Ling Han. As one of the 6 king tiers, he wasn't afraid of anyone at the same cultivation level. Pung! 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 The two of them continued to exchange blows. In terms of power, neither of them had an advantage over the other. Although Wuxia was slightly more powerful, it was only by a very insignificant margin. Thus, this could still be viewed as an evenly matched battle. Their fists rained down on each other at incredible speed, and they had already exchanged 100 or so blows in just a few seconds. In the end, they separated from each other and concluded their brief moment of unarmed combat. Ling Han was naturally unscathed. However, blood was dripping from Wuxia's wounded left hand. In fact, his entire left arm was trembling in exertion. Even origin power shields wouldn't be of much use during such close-quarters combat. This was also why many cultivators avoided close-quarters combat whenever possible. Unarmed combat would reduce the effectiveness of origin power, though origin power was what most people cultivated. Very few people practiced body arts. In terms of physique, it was clear that Ling Han had achieved a resounding victory. Wuxia grimaced in disbelief. His opponent's divine sense was already frighteningly stable. Yet, right now, he realized that his opponent's physique was also on a freakish level. How can someone be so freakish? The spectators were all stunned. Wuxia had unleashed his full battle prowess, yet he had still been wounded. Who could have predicted this? Meanwhile, Gan Shuyuan's slender body trembled in shock. She finally realized just how wrong she had been. She had provoked and offended an absolute freak. If Ling Han didn't die, his achievements would definitely surpass the ancients and amaze the contemporaries. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "Junior brother Wu, are you still not going to admit defeat?" Wuxia's expression was livid, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. Wasn't this utterly humiliating? He was one of the 6 kings, so who didn't give him some face? However, this person who had just entered the sect was acting aggressive and overbearing. Was this really a smart choice? Han Lin, you've gone too far, Wuxia said through gritted teeth. Although he still had some trump cards, his mind went numb whenever he thought about his opponent's incredible physique. Could his trump cards really contain his opponent? In any case, this was only a sparring match, and some of his trump cards were consumable as they would be gone once he used them. Thus, he wasn't willing to use them either. That being the case, he hoped that Ling Han would relent after a while and not take things too far. "Call me senior brother, and I'll naturally go easier on you," Ling Han said calmly. Wuxia had used shady tactics against the Rain Emperor, so how could Ling Han let him off the hook easily? There was a dark look in Wuxia's eyes, and his fists were also clenched tightly. He would never admit defeat. "You really think you can win?" He channeled a forbidden technique, and a strange pattern appeared on his forehead. It radiated with a dim and eerie glow. "What's that?" The spectators were all astonished and frightened. They had merely glanced at the pattern, yet it felt as if their minds had been slashed by a sword. This made them feel extremely uncomfortable. That's the extreme nightmare technique," someone shouted in astonishment. Heavens! Senior brother Wu actually mastered that ancient technique. Everyone hurriedly asked the person what this technique was. Only then did he reveal that this was one of the most profound cultivation techniques of the Majestic Heaven sect. However, it was incredibly difficult to cultivate, and there was no record of anyone being able to successfully master it. To their surprise, however, Wuxia was actually using this technique. Wuxia's aura changed noticeably, and a dark air rose from his body. It was as if he had transformed into Night Gaunt, one that would bring boundless nightmares to its victims. Ling Han was completely unfazed. Both his physique and his divine sense had broken through the limit of the mountain river tier, so what did he need to worry about? He stood in an undefeatable position, and the only unknown was the method by which he would achieve victory. Let's see what he's got. He was extremely interested in this cultivation technique as it caused a hint of fear to grip at his heart. "You'll regret this," Wuxia said coldly. He made a punching motion toward Ling Han, and countless streaks of dark light surged from his fist. He had suffered once already, so he didn't dare engage in unarmed combat with Ling Han again. Instead, he reverted to cultivator's traditional tactic. She increased his distance from the opponent to battle using martial arts techniques. Ling Han swung his fists in defense. Pu. The streaks of dark light struck his fist, and they surprisingly left several patches of blood marks. So powerful. Ling Han was astonished. One had to realize that the toughness of his physique was already on par with level 5 godly metal. In other words, it was equivalent to the full power defense of a cultivator at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Even so, Wuxia's attack had still left several blood marks on his fists. This was proof of just how terrifying the streaks of dark light were. Meanwhile, Wuxia almost fainted in shock. In reality, his cultivation level was too low for him to channel the extreme nightmare technique. He was indeed able to channel it now, yet this came at the price of him not being able to use origin power for an entire 3 months after this. He had paid such a heavy price, so the streaks of dark light that he had unleashed were naturally terrifying to the extreme. However, they merely left a few blood marks on Ling Han's fists. How could he accept this? He wanted to vomit a large mouthful of blood. It's fairly powerful, but it's still not enough. Ling Han laughed loudly as he manipulated his divine demon sword and launched a flurry of attacks that completely suppressed Wuxia. Chapter 1157, A New Age. Boom. 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 Ling Han continued his frenzied attack on Wuxia. He was hellbent on defeating him and making him open his mouth to admit defeat. He owed this to the Rain Emperor. However, he had to admit that seeds were indeed supreme prodigies. Wuxia was a king tier among the seeds, so he was naturally incredibly powerful. Ling Han had cultivated each major tier to a state of perfection, but he wasn't the only person in the world who had achieved this. At least, Wuxia was also a prodigy who had achieved this. If Ling Han hadn't formed 5 mountains and rivers, he would have been a mere sandbag before Wuxia, regardless of how prodigious he was. Now, however, there was no significant difference in strength between them. However, Ling Han possessed a physique that made him truly invincible against those at the same cultivation level as him. This was a massive advantage, and it allowed him to attack with more freedom and less worry. In other words, he could place more of his focus and energy into attacking. On the other, Wuxia was indeed able to wound Ling Han after activating a secret technique, yet he definitely wouldn't be able to maintain this level of offense. The two of them exchanged blows, and both of them shed blood. Heavens! Mountain river tier cultivators can actually become this powerful. Compared to them, it's as if I'm a weak cultivator who still hasn't reached the mountain river tier yet. I definitely have to form 5 mountains and rivers. Everyone clasped their heads and exclaimed in shock. Meanwhile, many people decided that they wouldn't break through to the Sun-Moon tier unless they formed 5 mountains and rivers. This had a significant influence on the Majestic Heaven sect, as sometime in the future, several people from this cohort did indeed manage to form 5 mountains and rivers. However, many more people remained stuck at the mountain river tier for life, not even being able to reach the Sun-Moon tier. After all, forming 5 mountains and rivers was tremendously difficult, even for seed-level prodigies. Ling Han roared ferociously as he unleashed his own sword Dao. Not only was the combination of the fast technique and the sword of the great Dao quick, but it also possessed a devastating destructive ability. This was his own Dao, and he had named it the lightning sword technique. He had chosen the word lightning as it represented the fastest speed in the world. In addition, the might of lightning was also extremely terrifying. This was analogous to his own Dao. Moreover, just like how the Rain Emperor's Son of Heaven fist technique would evolve along with the elevation of his cultivation level, the might of the lightning sword technique would also increase along with the elevation of Ling Han's cultivation level. This was because the lightning sword technique wasn't a fixed technique. Rather, it was a type of intent realm and a technique that displayed one's comprehension of the great Dao. Shua, shua, shua. It was as if Ling Han had become one with his divine demon sword, and the might of his lightning sword technique was elevated to an all-new height. Wuxia grunted in exertion. He had already been on the ropes just then, when Ling Han still hadn't retrieved his god tool yet. So, how could his situation have improved now that Ling Han was wielding his divine demon sword? This was a god tool that had been nurtured by Ling Han, and thus it was connected to his heart and mind. As such, Ling Han could maximize the might of this god tool. Wuxia was forced onto his back foot, and he eventually went from returning 5 strikes for every 10 strikes to returning 1 strike for every 10 strikes. Although he hadn't lost in the sense of the word yet, everyone knew that he had, in fact, already lost. He had lost, and there was not a single excuse to make. He and Ling Han were at the same cultivation level, and his strength was clearly inferior. Everyone remained silent. However, there was excitement on many people's faces. Wuxia and the others had already occupied the positions of king tier for far too long. It was about time for the next generation to step up and usurp their positions. And the person who had fired the first shot was none other than Ling Han. The new disciples of the sect had all arrived with big dreams and ambitions. Upon witnessing Ling Han's might, their confidence all increased 100-fold. They yearned to reach the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier, as doing so would allow them to challenge, even replace the older generation of king tiers, just as Ling Han had. Ling Han's battle was a prelude that opened the curtains to a new age. After several more exchanges, Wuxia was sent flying by a strike from Ling Han's sword. A gaping wound was cut into his chest, and it would have been even more serious had Ling Han not had mercy on him. In fact, he would have been cut into two at the waist. This was only a spar, and Ling Han was only seeking justice for the Rain Emperor. The two of them weren't archenemies who were hell-bent on fighting to the death. However, Wuxia had been defeated before all the other seeds, so it was reasonable to assume that he would hate Ling Han's guts from this moment on. Wuxia stared daggers at Ling Han before angrily turning around and leaving. He paid no attention to the fact that this gathering still had yet to conclude. Junior brother Wu, where are the tea leaves? Ling Han asked with a chuckle. Since enmity had already been bred between them, he didn't mind making it even worse. Wuxia paused mid-step. He then tossed 10 sparkling and crystal-like tea leaves down without so much as a glance back. This was none other than the 10 pieces of serene poplar tea leaves that he had promised. However, he had tossed them toward He Tao, not Ling Han. He continued to stride away, and he quickly descended from the mountain peak and disappeared into the lingering clouds and mists that surrounded the mountain. Ling Han clapped his hands indifferently as he returned to his seat. He shut his eyes, and it appeared as if he were napping. His expression was relaxed, yet this caused a strong sense of wariness to grip He Tao and the other king tiers' minds. In terms of battle prowess alone, he was genuinely not much stronger than Wuxia. However, he possessed the divine demon sword, which was an immensely powerful god tool. Even though it wasn't a level 4 god tool yet, it was already starting to display an overwhelming might. Moreover, he possessed an astounding physique that allowed him to disregard a significant portion of his opponent's attacks. However, were there secret techniques or god tools that could threaten his physique? At least, his physique wouldn't be undefeatable before he reached the level of Saint King. In any case, one couldn't underestimate the 6 kings just because one of their members had lost a battle. If they were forced into a life-and-death battle, who knew how many trump cards they could unleash? Who knew what kind of terrifying power they could summon? Of course, Ling Han was only being vigilant and cautious. He still maintained the belief that he was invincible at the same cultivation level. There was a look of zeal on Ding Ping's face as he looked at his master. His master was far too powerful. This was his master, someone who could always surprise and shock others. People had said that he didn't have the right to enter the majestic heavens sect before, yet he had instantly jumped out and proved them wrong. People had said that the 6 kings were invincible just then, yet Wuxia had been clinically and ruthlessly disposed of. He definitely had to follow the example of Ling Han. He didn't yearn to surpass him, he merely wished that he wouldn't lose face for his master and bring disrepute to his mighty name. The sparring matches continued. However, after witnessing the mighty battle between Ling Han and Wuxia, the ensuing battles all seemed boring to the extreme. The spectators were all bored, and as a result, those who were sparring also became bored. It wasn't long before no one else stepped up to battle. The seed-level prodigies started to discuss their understandings of cultivation. Those gathered here were all supreme prodigies, though it was still impossible for them to be perfect in every single aspect. Rather, they each had their own strengths and weaknesses. Thus, they frequently nodded in agreement, even if they were only listening to the unique views of someone at the low extreme. The atmosphere became increasingly lively, and none of them kept their understandings a secret from others. Of course, things like secret techniques definitely wouldn't be shared with others. Doing so wouldn't be generous, it would be incredibly foolish. Ling Han also learned a lot. His lightning sword technique was based on the understanding and destruction of the great Tao, and thus the comprehension of others also provided him with ideas and inspiration. He generously shared some of his understandings as well, though he obviously didn't share his core understandings, such as the lightning sword technique. Hee, the water has finished boiling. Let's drink some tea, He Tao said with a smile. Wisps of steam were finally drifting out from the small teapot. However, the steam strangely didn't dissipate. Instead, it formed into all kinds of mysterious shapes. As expected of divine water. The contents of this teapot were as valuable as an entire city. Chapter 1158, Arrival of Yang Hao. In some sense, He Tao and Wu Zhou were actually quite decent people. At least, they had both offered genuinely good and valuable treasures to share with their junior brothers and sisters. If Wu Zhou hadn't been too insistent on winning and used shady techniques against the Rain Emperor, Ling Han wouldn't have challenged and humiliated him. Only after asking around did Ling Han learn that the other 4 king tiers had all gone out to explore and train. In reality, the disciples of the Majestic Heavens sect all had fairly good relationships with each other. If the seniors obtained valuable items during their adventures, they would take them out to share with the newer disciples of the sect. This was a tradition. When the other 4 king tiers returned, they would also share some valuable treasures with Ling Han and the others. Such practice was repeated generation after generation, and it had already become a good tradition of the sect. Everyone picked the 10 most outstanding individuals of the Tao discussing segment. These 10 cultivators would enjoy an extra serene poplar tea leaf in their tea. Ling Han was naturally chosen as one of the 10. If he couldn't qualify for the top 10, who could? The Rain Emperor also had the honor of being chosen as one of the top 10. However, Ding Ping didn't win this honor. He had lost to Lan Wan, and regardless of the reason, a defeat was a defeat. In any case, it had revealed that his mental state still wasn't up to scratch yet. He Tao walked over, and asked, "Brother Han, are you interested in exploring an ancient land?" Ling Han smiled, and said, "What kind of ancient land could this be?" "It's most likely a large sect from the distant past. It appears as if the sect was destroyed, though many valuable items still remain at the site," He Tao replied with a serious expression. He knew that he wouldn't be able to convince Ling Han if he didn't reveal some information of substance. "Being as powerful as brother he is, there's no need for you to invite me, is there?" Ling Han said. He Tao chuckled, and said, "There's a treasure storage, and it can only be opened by the combined power of 7 people. Moreover, these 7 people all have to be at the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier." Ling Han was astonished upon hearing this. There's such a high bar for opening up a treasure storage? This ancient sect must have been super impressive. The Majestic Heavens sect had gathered all of the most brilliant prodigies from the 100 or so nearby planets, yet only 7 of the newest generation of disciples had succeeded in forming 5 mountains and rivers. "I guess I can go then." Ling Han's interest was piqued, and he asked, "When are we setting off?" He didn't ask where the ancient land was, as that would be far too insincere and insensitive. He Tao laughed heartily, and said, "There's no hurry. This ancient land is actually controlled by our sect. In fact, it's a mystery realm that opens once every 100 years. However, it's close to opening again, and we'll probably be able to set off within the next half of a year." To immortal beings, half a year was indeed a very short time. The sect has wanted to open that treasure storage for a long time, yet there are strict requirements for who can open and enter it. To be more precise, one must be at the mountain river tier. However, only 6 of us were at the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier before, so we could only sigh in disappointment every time we passed by that treasure storage. If it weren't for this treasure storage, Shenjuer, Shirangua, and Wu Wentong could all have broken through to the sun-moon tier several decades ago. However, they held on to the hope that they could one day enter this treasure storage, and it was because of this hope that they suppressed their cultivation level. They're planning to break through to the sun-moon tier after exploring this treasure storage. The heavens have carried out the desire of man. Now that Brother Han has joined, there's a large chance that we'll finally be able to open that treasure storage. Ling Han was astonished, and he said, "So, what you're saying is that Shenjuer, Shirangua, and Wu Wentong have all reached a state of perfection in the mountain river tier already? Gasp. They possessed a power that could surpass 10 stars. In other words, their power was on par with cultivators at the early stage of the low extreme of the sun-moon tier. He Tao smiled faintly, and said, "Indeed, these three have already perfected the mountain river tier. Kuang Peishan formed his fifth river a dozen or so years ago, but I'm unsure as to whether he's perfected the mountain river tier yet. After forming a fifth mountain, one's power would surpass 7 stars. After cultivating the fifth mountain to a state of perfection, one's power would surpass 8 stars. And, after forming a fifth river, one's power would surpass 9 stars. Ling Han was especially curious, and he asked, "What about brother He?" He. A smile appeared on He Tao's face, and he paused for a moment before saying, "I'm a bit behind the 4 of them. I only formed my fifth river a few days ago." Gasp. His power had surpassed 9 stars. In comparison to the other king tiers, Wuxia was the weakest. His fifth mountain definitely hadn't reached a level of perfection yet. Otherwise, his power should have been enough to overwhelm Ling Han, not just be slightly higher. As expected of king tiers. So powerful. Ling Han hadn't dared to underestimate the 6 kings to begin with. Now that he heard He Tao's introduction, he naturally held them in an even higher regard. However, this didn't mean that he would venerate or fear them. He had his own trump cards, after all, so there was no need for him to be fearful or overly cautious. Everyone continued to drink tea and discuss Tao. This was good tea brewed with good water, and this caused everyone to become immersed in the great Tao. The prodigious nature of those present became clear at this moment as divine light started to exude from almost everyone's body. Even the regulations of the great Tao could be seen, and this was naturally thanks to the effects of the serene poplar tea. However, there were also exceptions, such as Ling Han. There was no sign of divine light on his body. There was nothing he could do about this. He had drunk reincarnation tea before, so how could mere serene poplar tea have any significant effect? There was no divine light on Ling Han, nor was there any on He Tao. He had either drunk this tea before, or he had drunk tea with even better effects. Tea such as serene poplar tea would be most effective the first time one drank them. Afterward, its effects would decrease with each increasing time it was drunk. The two of them exchanged a glance, and both of them smiled. At the same time, they both held each other in even higher regard. Wang. A devastating aura suddenly swept through the peak, and it was as if a demon god were descending into the world. A cold chill gripped at everyone's heart. Who is this? Everyone was stunned. This was an important peak of the majestic heaven sect, so who could swagger over here to show off their might? This thought had barely crossed their minds when a male in white walked over, his hands clasped behind his back. He was a stunningly handsome male, with his complexion as clear as jade and his body slender and tall. This was the kind of male who could elicit shrieks from fangirls with a single glance cast in their direction. Lord Yang, many people instantly shouted in astonishment. Even though they were seeds, there was still a deep sense of fear and respect on their faces when they saw this young man. Yang Hao, a prodigy among prodigies. He had reached the sun-moon tier after a mere 600 years of cultivation, and he was more so invincible against those at the same cultivation level. The other prodigies were merely his stepping stones, they were side characters whose existence was to highlight his might. What cultivation level was he at right now? No one knew. However, they knew that he had definitely improved in leaps and bounds. The sun-moon tier and mountain river tier were two completely different tiers. Even if one reached the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier, they would only be able to challenge the weakest of the weak sun-moon tier cultivators. Many people stood up and bowed respectfully to Yang Hao, saying, "Our respects to Lord Yang." In the majestic heaven sect, those at a higher cultivation level were all referred to as Lord rather than Senior or Master. He Tao remained silent. He was about to perfect the mountain river tier, and breaking through to the sun-moon tier would be especially easy for a prodigy like him. Thus, he didn't respect or fear Yang Hao much. However, strength was the most important attribute in the cultivation world, so he would remain a peg lower than Yang Hao as long as he didn't advance to the Sun-Moon tier. Thus, he wouldn't actively provoke Yang Hao. A domineering aura radiated from Yang Hao, and he was like a demon lord who people could only kowtow and gaze up to. He swept his gaze across the peak before saying calmly, "Which of you is Han Lin?" Chapter 1159, Battle to the End. Which of us is Han Lin? Yang Hao came to look for Han Lin. Many people were unclear about the situation. They thought that Yang Hao had come to invite Ling Han to join his side after hearing about his victory over Wuxia. However, people like Gan Shiyun knew that Yang Hao definitely hadn't come to ask Ling Han to join his side. Gan Shiyun couldn't help but be filled with delight. Yang Hao was finally making a move. Zhang Long couldn't deal with Ling Han, but would Yang Hao have any trouble dealing with Ling Han? If Ling Han could genuinely stand up against Yang Hao, she would never, ever offend or provoke him again. Instead, she would take a wide berth every time she came across him. Ling Han didn't back down. He stood up and said, "I'm Han Lin. Is anything the matter?" Yang Hao glanced at him before saying, "I'll give you two options. 1. Kowtow to me and apologize. Since you've killed one of my followers, you'll become my new follower from now on. 2. I'll belt you every time I see you. I'll do so until you leave the sect, at which time I'll personally kill you." Gasp. Everyone was stunned upon hearing this. They had initially thought that a bright, unlimited future lay ahead of Ling Han, and there was even a chance for him to become the strongest disciple of the Majestic Heaven sect. However, everything had changed in the blink of an eye. He had offended Yang Hao. Just listen to Yang Hao's words. Either submit to him and become his dog or suffer humiliation for years and be killed upon leaving the sect. Although Yang Hao had put it in a less severe manner, saying that he would kill Ling Han once he quit the sect, such a threat was not against sect rules. Everyone knew that he would act once Ling Han set foot outside sect grounds. Did Ling Han still have a future? Which do you choose? Yang Hao asked calmly. Ling Han shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, but I like neither of the two options. Whether you like them or not isn't important. What's important is that I've given you two options, of which you must select one." Yang Hao said in a domineering manner. He did indeed have the right to speak in such a haughty manner. "Heh, I'll pick the third option, I'll ignore you." Ling Han smiled and said, "When I advance to the Sun-Moon tier and reach a similar cultivation level to you, it'll be your turn to make this choice." The others almost spat blood. Offending Yang Hao was already bad enough, yet Han Lin was actually audacious enough to provoke him even further. Meanwhile, Ling Han thought nothing of it. What else could he do? Act obsequiously and pray that Yang Hao would let him off? Impossible. Yang Hao was an opinionated person who believed that everyone in the world should submit to him. How could he take his words back so easily? That being the case, why did Ling Han have to show him any respect? Yang Hao chuckled coldly and said, "You're quite the stubborn person. However, I wouldn't have it any other way." He extended a hand toward Ling Han. Wang. Divine patterns gathered, and heaven and earth instantly lost their luster. It was as if the sky were about to collapse. Powerful. Incredibly powerful. Before his overwhelming might, the so-called 6 king tiers seemed like nothing but a joke. He was the true king, a peerless king. Ling Han's expression became stern, and he said, "You're a Sun-Moon tier elite, yet you're going to attack me inside the sect? So what?" Yang Hao paid no heed to Ling Han's words as he swatted his palm toward him. Boom! He made a pressing motion, and a gigantic origin power hand materialized in the air and pressed down on Ling Han. There was nothing fancy about this strike, nor did he use any secret techniques. He had merely made a simple pressing motion with his hand. However, the might of this strike was harrowing, and even He Tao's expression became apprehensive. He was certain that he wouldn't be able to block such a strike. There was an insurmountable gulf between the Mountain River tier and the Sun Moon tier unless one reached a power of 10 stars. Even so, they would only be able to challenge the weakest of Sun Moon tier elites. However, who was Yang Hao? So what if he had only just advanced to the Sun Moon tier? He was a super genius to begin with, so how could someone one major tier below him dream of challenging him? Ling Han would be no match for him, regardless of how freakish he was. However, Yang Hao wanted to humiliate him? No way. Ling Han retrieved his lion seal. Shui Yenyu had naturally returned the lion seal and Vajra seal to him already. Wang. Ling Han's power instantly soared to the peak stage of the Sun Moon tier. However, a divine seal was only a divine seal, after all. Thus, this peak stage was only the peak stage of the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier, not the pinnacle level. Pung! Ling Han made a punching motion, and a massive flame fist soared into the sky and slammed into the gigantic origin power hand. Boom! The gigantic hand was shattered, and the flame fist continued to soar toward the sky, exuding a petrifying aura as it did so. Oh! Yang Hao was slightly surprised, and he said, "Who would have thought? You actually have a divine seal on you. However, this can only raise your power to the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier. Heh, you want to challenge me with such measly power?" He stepped forward, and a devastating power instantly seeped from his body, transforming into intertwining patches of divine patterns that were as dazzling as could be. "I reached the high extreme of the Sun Moon tier 12 years ago," he announced proudly. The others almost fainted upon hearing this. What kind of cultivation speed was this? Was he trying to scare them to death? He was the #1 prodigy. He was definitely the #1 prodigy in the entire history of the Majestic Heaven sect. He had cultivated for no more than 1,000 years, yet he had already soared from the shattering void tier to the high extreme of the Sun Moon tier. Not only that, but he had even cultivated each tier to a genuine state of perfection. Even the word prodigy wasn't enough to describe his absurd talent. A slight sense of apprehension gripped Ling Han's heart. Although his power had risen to the peak stage of the Sun Moon tier, this also meant that he no longer possessed the ability to challenge those at a higher cultivation level. Meanwhile, what about Yang Hao? He was certainly a 10-star genius, so adding a power of 10 stars to his cultivation level that was currently at the high extreme of the Sun Moon tier. Even if he were only at the early stage of the high extreme, his power could still surpass 3 stars beyond the pinnacle level. This was a power that overwhelmed Ling Han's power. A power 3 stars beyond the pinnacle level? I should be able to remedy this. Die! Yang Hao snapped his fingers, and a streak of light instantly shot toward Ling Han. Ling Han replied with a punch. Pung! The streak of light was obliterated into nothingness. Huh! This power doesn't seem like it's 3 stars beyond the pinnacle level. Ling Han was puzzled. The power of Yang Hao's strike was evenly matched with his power. It definitely wasn't 3 stars beyond the pinnacle level. Perhaps he didn't reach the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier? How is that possible? Yang Hao was honored as the #1 prodigy of the Majestic Heaven sect, so how could he not have reached the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier? Relatively speaking, this was the easiest pinnacle level to reach. Ling Han roared and took initiative to attack. He and Yang Hao quickly became locked in an intense battle. Yang Hao humphed softly, yet he didn't dare underestimate his opponent. After several exchanges, Ling Han became certain that his power was no weaker than that of Yang Hao. More precisely, their power was basically on the same level. He became even more puzzled, and he couldn't help but use his mind to communicate with the Black Tower and ask for answers from Notionless Saint. What a stupid brat! The Notionless Saint roared with laughter, and said, "Even if you attain a power of 10 stars at the Mountain River tier, do you think you can still maintain a battle prowess of 10 stars after advancing to the lower levels of the Sun Moon tier? According to your line of thought, wouldn't it be possible to reach a power that surpasses 11, 12, or even more stars?" Yeah. That's right. Ling Han kind of understood, and he said, so you're saying that the number of stars one can surpass will drop after they advance to the sun-moon tier? It doesn't drop per se, the notionless saint explained. The power of the sun-moon tier is far above that of the mountain-river tier, so a power of 10 stars at the mountain-river tier can only compare to power at the early stage of the low extreme of the sun-moon tier. After advancing to the first stage of the sun-moon tier, a power that surpasses 10 stars will become a power that can surpass 6 stars. This is similar to how you reached a power of 20 stars at the Shattering Void tier. Were you able to keep these 20 stars after advancing to the mountain-river tier? Ling Han finally understood. The main reason for this was because of the gulf in power that existed between each major tier of the immortal levels. This would lead to a drop in the number of stars one's power could surpass after they advanced to the next major tier. 10 stars would drop to 6 stars, so 6 stars would drop to 3 or perhaps even 2 stars. No wonder even 5-star geniuses are rare. This all makes sense now. Chapter 1160, Counterattack from the Weak. Yang Hao was brimming with confidence, and he said, although your power is on par with mine, you have to realize that power is only one part of battle prowess. His words couldn't be truer. The lion's seal could raise Ling Han's power, yet it couldn't raise his speed or defenses. Moreover, his grasp of the regulations of heaven and earth also remained at the mountain-river tier. Thus, there was still a huge gulf between him and Yang Hao. Yang Hao's strike just then had only been a casual one. Although he had used power at the sun-moon tier, he hadn't channeled the corresponding regulations. However, he didn't hold back anymore, and he unleashed a boundless might that fluctuated throughout the surroundings. It was as if a great emperor had descended onto this mountain peak. Suppress him. Yang Hao threw a punch, and the brilliant divine patterns that burst from his hand made it seem as if heaven and earth were colorless. Ling Han fell into a frantic retreat. He merely possessed enough power to defend against Yang Hao's attacks. However, his grasp of regulations was far inferior to his opponent's. He drew his divine demon sword, a cold expression on his face. He had to make the most of his strengths. If he simply battled against Yang Hao head-on, his only fate would be to suffer defeat. You still won't yield to me? Yang Hao raised a hand, and the gigantic origin power hand reappeared in the air. It grabbed at Ling Han, and this time, the hand was engraved with a multitude of divine patterns. This was certainly not a hand that could be shattered with a single strike. Ling Han unleashed his lightning sword technique. Xiao! His speed was incredible, and with the support of more power, he could destroy regulations to a greater extent. However, his physique still lagged behind. Pa. Following his lightning-quick dash, at least a dozen of his bones snapped, while his skin and flesh cracked open. Blood sprayed through the air. A magnificent strike slashed over. Yang Hao was slightly astonished. He raised his hand to his face, only to see a streak of blood appear on his hand. Ling Han's strike had actually wounded him. It had left a tiny scratch on his face. This was merely an insignificant wound, yet Yang Hao couldn't stand to accept this. He was genuinely an invincible king tier, and his cultivation level was far above that of Ling Han. Yet, he had actually been cut by his opponent. This was utter humiliation. Although Ling Han had cut Yang Hao with his sword, his situation was far direr than Yang Hao's. His body was soaked in blood, and it was as if he had been trampled hundreds of times. However, Yang Hao knew that he hadn't hurt Ling Han at all. Rather, Ling Han's wounds were caused by him not being able to withstand the overwhelming power of his own strike. In other words, he had lost this exchange. I severely underestimated him, Yang Hao thought to himself. He stood serious and unmoving, yet streaks of crimson light burst from his body. The might of the crimson light was so profound that everyone present was unable to breathe. It was as if a formidable ancient beast were about to appear from his body. He lashed out again, this time striking with his palm. Ling Han wanted to unleash his fast technique, yet he was shocked to find that his movements had been sealed. Is this Yang Hao's secret technique? Boom! Yang Hao's palm struck over, and a giant crater was smashed into the mountain peak. Meanwhile, Ling Han vomited several mouthfuls of blood as he was sent flying by the strike. He had already activated the Vajra seal upon realizing the dire nature of his situation. If he hadn't done so, vomiting blood would have been the least of his worries, because there wouldn't have been a single piece of unbroken bone in his body. Huh. It looks like you own quite a lot of valuable items. Yang Hao exclaimed in surprise. A mere mountain river tier cultivator was actually able to struggle on and withstand his strikes with the help of 2 divine seals. This was truly astounding. Ling Han channeled the indestructible heaven scroll and rapidly healed the broken bones in his body. He didn't bother to heal his flesh wounds. When his broken bones were close to being fully healed, he laughed loudly, and said, "What does that have to do with you? Yang Hao, eat my sword." He unleashed his lightning sword technique again. There was a cold glint, and his strike was like an immortal swooping down from beyond the sky. Yang Hao was prepared this time, and he crossed his arms before his body. At the same time, strands of regulations formed divine chains that crisscrossed before his body and acted as a shield. Ling Han let out a loud roar. He had already activated the Vajra seal, so his defenses had also reached the peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier. As such, he could destroy regulations without inflicting wounds upon his own body. There was a flash, and his sword slashed through the crisscross of divine chains. Specks of blood flew through the air. A dark expression fell across Yang Hao's face. He had been wounded again. The wound was only on his hand, and like before, it wasn't very deep. However, he had been wounded twice. Twice by the same person. In his eyes, this was utterly unacceptable. If Ling Han were at the heavenly body tier, he would have nothing to say. However, the key was that he wasn't. A mere mountain river tier cultivator had wounded him twice in quick succession. This was absolutely absurd. Yang Hao was seething with rage, and his boundless anger transformed into a sea of flames. He lashed out again, making a pressing motion with his hand. A dark cloud instantly gathered above Ling Han's head. Crackle. Flashes of lightning arced across the sky. Yang Hao had actually summoned the power of lightning. Everyone was stunned upon seeing this. Yang Hao was far too terrifying. He could actually summon the power of lightning. Boom! Like a dance of silver snakes, countless arcs of lightning struck at Ling Han. Although Ling Han was still standing when the dark clouds dissipated, his clothes were already ripped and tattered. Large swathes of his skin were also charred, and it was almost as if he had become a big lump of coal. If it weren't for the Vajra seal, it was very likely that he would have been killed by this strike. Ling Han used his divine sense to communicate with the Rain Emperor and Ding Ping, warning them not to come over to try and help him in battle. Their strength was far inferior to Yang Hao's, so it would be foolish for them to step out in a spur-of-the-moment act. Anyhow, he was quite puzzled at this moment. The sect clearly had a rule against disciples at a higher cultivation level attacking those at a lower cultivation level. However, their intense battle had already gone on for quite some time. He refused to believe that no higher-ups of the sect had noticed them. However, they didn't step forward to put a stop to the battle even though they were aware of it. What was the meaning of this? Ling Han's body swayed. Then, he couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood. He wasn't a genuine Sun-Moon tier cultivator, after all, so he was naturally at a massive disadvantage when battling against a prodigy such as Yang Hao. However, no one looked down on him because of this. Quite the contrary, in fact they all felt a deep sense of admiration for him. He was an absolute freak. He was able to exchange blows with Yang Hao, and he had even managed to wound him twice. If their cultivation levels were the same, Ling Han would genuinely possess the ability to obliterate Yang Hao's legend of invincibility. Can you still continue? Yang Hao asked with a cold chuckle. He didn't feel any shame for picking on the weak. In his eyes, he was merely trampling an ant to death. As such, was there any need for him to take this to heart? Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Why not?" His fighting spirit raged, and it reverberated loudly in his heart. Yang Hao humphed in displeasure. In reality, he dearly hoped that Ling Han would submit to him. Even though Ling Han was weaker than him, admitting defeat would still leave mental trauma in his mind. If their cultivation levels became the same in the future, Ling Han's trauma would give Yang Hao a mental edge should they ever face off again. However, Ling Han was far more resilient than he had expected, and this caused him to feel some heat. He enjoyed a great deal of special treatment in the sect, yet this still didn't give him the freedom to kill people as he wished. The main reason he was able to target Ling Han was because there was a reason for him to do so. His follower had been killed by Ling Han, after all. The higher-ups of the sect would allow him to let off some steam, but they definitely wouldn't allow him to kill other disciples. There were some bottom lines that couldn't be traversed. Anyhow, Ling Han was also a supreme prodigy, so the sect definitely held high hopes for him. Another reason they let Yang Hao off the hook was because they wanted to take the edge off Ling Han's spirit. They didn't want him to become too arrogant. Fine, I'll utterly defeat this youth and give him an unforgettable lesson. I'll crush him so thoroughly that he'll feel afraid every time he sees me in the future. Yang Hao moved his arms, and divine chains danced through the air. Chapter 1161, Empress protecting her husband. Yang Hao suppressed Ling Han in all aspects. Even with the protection of the Vajra seal, Ling Han was still riddled with an increasing number of wounds. If it weren't for the indestructible Heaven Scroll, there was no way that he would still be standing at this moment. The onlookers couldn't help but sigh in admiration of his tenacity. Not only were his defenses and recovery ability astonishing, his willpower was even more terrifying. It wouldn't be surprising or humiliating even if someone at the same cultivation level as Yang Hao were to lose to him. Thus, it would be very normal for Ling Han to lose, seeing as his cultivation level was so much lower than Yang Hao's. So, why was he persisting? Anyhow, Ling Han wasn't merely acting as a sandbag. He had also managed to cut Yang Hao, though they were only two very small nicks. However, a cut was a cut, and being able to wound Yang Hao was an astounding feat. Which other disciples under the heavenly body tier could achieve this? Ling Han would eventually be defeated, but it would be a glorious defeat. That was already enough. Until when can you persist? Yang Hao said with a cold smile. In reality, he could still deal more damage to Ling Han. However, he purposefully held back. This wasn't because he was benevolent, but rather because he wanted to torment Ling Han even longer. His position as a king tier had actually drawn skepticism. This was unforgivable. Ling Han's fighting spirit soared as he wiped the blood from the corners of his mouth. He wasn't simply taking a beating and doing nothing else. Battling against such an opponent allowed him to grasp a deeper understanding and comprehension of his lightning sword technique. He wanted to keep fighting. However, the Lion's Seal and Vajra Seal were almost completely exhausted. Both of these divine seals could be used a maximum of 10 times. However, this number wasn't absolute, and a time limit existed for each time the seals were used. Thus, the Lion's Seal was almost exhausted even though Ling Han had only used it this one time. This was because he had already battled for too long. The Vajra Seal could still last for a while, though it definitely wouldn't last for too long. What can I do? Do I have to hide in the Black Tower? But that will expose the secret of the Black Tower. That's a spatial god tool. Moreover, it's one that can become invisible. I'm afraid that even the Venerable Trinity will become interested in it. Enough, a cold voice suddenly shouted. Yang Hao turned to look at the source of the sound. It came from a girl, one who looked charming and innocent. However, she was only at the high extreme of the mountain river tier, so what right did she have to command him? He ignored her and threw another palm strike at Ling Han. Pung! There was a flash of light, and the young woman uncannily appeared before Ling Han. Her slender hand was raised, and she easily dealt with his palm strike. Yang Hao was deeply astonished. He had failed to detect how that young woman had arrived before Ling Han. Something's off, he exclaimed in his mind. The young woman's aura was extremely unstable. She was clearly at the mountain river tier, yet the pressure radiating from her body caused apprehension to grip at his heart. In fact, there was even a hint of fear. This was the overwhelming pressure from a higher-tier cultivator. How was this possible? He was at the sun-moon tier, so one had to be at the heavenly body tier if they wanted to pressure him with their cultivation level. However, was this young woman at the heavenly body tier? What a joke! He refused to believe that she was at the heavenly body tier. Yang Hao attacked again, this time pushing his palm toward the young woman. I said, enough. Are you seeking death? A frosty look appeared in her eyes, and she also replied with a palm strike. Pa! Yang Hao was instantly sent flying. Clouds of blood exploded from his body, and then he collapsed on the ground, unmoving. He had been beaten unconscious. Everyone on the mountain peak felt their face distort. They could barely believe their eyes. That young woman was a seed who had just entered the sect. However, she didn't appear special, nor did she stand out in any way. Yet, right now, she had just sent Yang Hao flying with a single strike. What kind of formidable strength was this? They had to be seeing things. It had been Ling Han before he had appeared out of nowhere and defeated Wuxia, one of the 6 kings. Not only that, but he was even able to hold his own against Yang Hao. This was already deeply astounding. Yet, an even more freakish person had appeared at this moment. She had defeated Yang Hao with a single strike. Were the disciples of this new cohort trying to defy the heavens? Who is she? Isn't she a bit too powerful? She's called Hu Feiyun, and she's from the Chaotic Star's majestic empire of the Joint Peace Planet. That's right, she's the 9th king of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. Gasp! Isn't she at the mountain river tier? How can someone at the mountain river tier be so freakishly powerful? Han Lin is also at the mountain river tier. Isn't he also unimaginably freakish? That's different. Everyone was overwhelmed with shock. They could still accept Ling Han's freakish power as they had all seen him using the divine seals. Even so, his strength was still inferior to Yang Hao's. However, what about Hu Feiyun? Her power hadn't merely been at the sun-moon tier. Rather, it had been at the heavenly body tier. They couldn't accept this fact. Mountain river tier cultivators couldn't become that powerful even if they swallowed divine pills. Only Ling Han knew that it wasn't Hu Feiyun who had interfered. Rather, her body had been taken over and controlled by Empress Luanxing's soul. Sure enough, this Empress had him in her mind. Upon seeing him being beaten, she had resolutely come to protect her husband. TSK, she speaks tough, but her heart is soft. I like he. Yang Hao regained consciousness, and he stared at Hu Feiyun in disbelief. She had only thrown a casual strike, yet he had been utterly defeated. In fact, he didn't even have time to react. How large was the gulf between their power? He should have been invincible against those at the same cultivation level. Yet, right now, a mountain river tier cultivator had managed to hold his ground against him, albeit with a lot of difficulty. The next person was even more freakish, defeating him with a single strike. He felt as if his outlook on life had been distorted. How could such things occur? Did you enjoy your battle? Hu Feiyun asked coldly. It was the domineering Empress Luanxing who was in control of this body right now, and she made a striking motion at Yang Hao as she spoke. Pung! Yang Hao was thrown into the air, and clouds of blood once again exploded from his body. In fact, a large amount of his life essence also drained away. He was severely wounded, so much so that the foundation of his cultivation was endangered. A middle-aged man appeared, and said, don't overdo it. There were 2 great stars hovering behind him, both of which were protecting Yang Hao. Although Yang Hao had faced some challenges before, he could have still ground the edge off Ling Han's spirit. However, Yang Hao had been beaten to the point where even his life essence was starting to drain away. Things had been taken too far, especially since the sect held relatively high hopes for Yang Hao. "You dare to stop me?" Empress Luan Xing said coldly. A boundless might exuded from her body. The middle-aged man smiled and said, "You're Empress Luan Xing, aren't you? You left a spiritual mark on this person's body, and thus you're able to project a portion of your power into her body. However, it's only a spiritual mark, after all. I don't want to erase it from her body, so why don't we call it a day?" Who could guess that Empress Luan Xing was a member of the 9-snake tribe? Who could guess that she had the ability to separate out 9 souls and form 9 clones? This wasn't as simple as leaving a spiritual mark. Not only could Empress Luan Xing's 9 clones mature like normal cultivators, but they could even host her awareness and become infinitely more powerful. A baleful smile tugged at Empress Luan Xing's lips, and she said, "You can try." How domineering was a ruler. She didn't give him the time to refute her, and she immediately lashed out with her slender hand. Power at the heavenly body tier burst into the surroundings, and it was as if heaven were about to collapse and stars were about to fall. It seemed as if an apocalypse were about to befall them. The middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. How is she so powerful? He had no time to think, and he frantically moved to block her attack. Pang! He was sent flying by Empress Luan Xing's strike. Everyone was stunned. What the absolute fuck? She's so powerful that she probably has no friends. Chapter 1162, Don't Let This Dog Go Crazy Again. This middle-aged man was called Wei Zicheng, and he was at the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier. He was extremely renowned in the Majestic Heaven sect. Even at the Majestic Heaven sect, there were only 24 heavenly body tier elites. However, an elite like him had actually been sent flying by a single strike. Who could believe this? Not only that, but the person who had achieved this feat was actually a mere mountain river tier disciple. This was far too astonishing. As powerful and as prodigious as Yang Hao was, he could only battle against those at the sun-moon tier. Could he challenge heavenly body tier elites? No way. The onlookers had felt their heads go numb with shock when they witnessed Yang Hao being defeated by a single strike. Yet, right now, even Wei Zicheng was defeated by a single strike. The onlookers were transfixed with shock, and they were so stunned that even their souls almost left their bodies. Wei Zicheng grimaced as he crawled up from the ground, a look of pure shock on his face. He had thought that Hu Feiyun only possessed a spiritual mark of Empress Luan Xing. As such, her power would at most be a fraction of that of the heavenly body tier. However, by the looks of it right now, her power was far above just a fraction of the heavenly body tier. If a fraction of the Empress power was already this strong, then this Empress had definitely reached the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier. Wei Zicheng suppressed his anger, and said, "I have to admit that your strength is astonishing. However, this is the Majestic Heaven sect." Empress Luan Xing took no heed of his words. She clasped her hands behind her back, and said, "Don't let your dog run loose. If he goes crazy and attacks people again, I'll make sure to knock all of his teeth out." Yang Hao felt utterly humiliated. He had been compared to a dog. However, did he dare to jump out and speak now? That was Empress Luan Xing. Which ruler wasn't bold and wise? Which ruler wasn't supremely talented and at the peak stage of the heavenly body tier? Yang Hao was indeed an outstanding prodigy. However, if he wanted to surpass Empress Luan Xing, that would take him at least tens of thousands of years. In fact, it might even be impossible to surpass her. After all, how many Eternal River tier elites did this galaxy have? 1. Yang Hao could only swallow this humiliation. There was a look of deep hatred in his eyes as he glowered at Ling Han. It was because of this person that he had been humiliated before everyone. Although losing to a heavenly body tier elite wouldn't smear his reputation much, it was still extremely embarrassing to have so many others witness his pathetic defeat. Ling Han cracked a smile at him. This was his wife, so it was only natural that she stepped out to help her husband. Who told you to pick on me first? If our cultivation levels were the same, who would be afraid of whom? A look of fury flashed across Wei Zicheng's face. However, his might was significantly weakened due to Empress Luan Xing's domineering aura, and the threats that were at the tip of his tongue wouldn't come out no matter what. This was the difference between elites and king tiers. Remember my words. Empress Luan Xing swept her gaze over Yang Hao before shutting her eyes. When she reopened them, her formidable aura receded like a falling tide. Her domineering aura was gone, and it was replaced by one of innocence and ditziness. She had naturally reverted back to being Hu Feiyan. Huh? Why is everyone staring at me? The ditzy woman said. There was a puzzled look on her pretty face. The others couldn't help but grimace. Who would have thought that this unremarkable woman actually had such a terrifying background? This unremarkable wasn't referring to Hu Feiyan's looks, but rather her performance after she entered the sect. She hadn't done anything astonishing or worthy of notice. Thus, she was naturally unremarkable when compared to the other similarly talented seed-level prodigies. However, there was actually the spiritual mark of a supreme elite imprinted into this unremarkable woman's body. This almost frightened them to death. Thankfully, they hadn't picked on her before. Otherwise, they would die without even knowing how they were killed. Although Empress Luan Xing had left, Wei Zicheng still didn't dare to touch Hu Feiyan. He glanced at her one last time before grabbing Yang Hao and striding down the mountain peak. Although Yang Hao hadn't been killed by Empress Luan Xing's attacks, he had still suffered extremely grave wounds. In fact, his wounds were definitely a dozen or even 24 times more severe than Ling Han's. This revealed the Empress' attitude: if you beat my people, I'd return the favor 10 times over. How domineering. Ling Han murmured to himself. No wonder she wants me to reach the Genesis tier before allowing me to marry her. Otherwise, based on her strong temperament, she'll definitely be the one riding on top of me. Say, it's not like I can't accept that position. After this incident, none of the seeds felt like continuing their discussions anymore. Thus, everyone started to take their leave. Anyhow, they all had wild ambitions to reach the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier after witnessing the battles of the King tier prodigies. Otherwise, what would it matter even if they advanced to the Sun Moon tier? They would most definitely lose if they were to battle against King tiers at the same cultivation level. They were all prodigies among prodigies, and thus it was only natural that their aim was to become an invincible King tier. Brother Han, I'll contact you in a few days, He Tao said with a smile. He then waved and bade farewell. Ling Han nodded, and said, sure, let's talk later. Senior Brother Han, do you know of someone called Ling Han? Xiao Sisi and the others all walked over and stared at Ling Han. Like Ling Han, this man also possessed a terrifying physique. However, they refused to believe that there existed two such freaks in the world. Moreover, this person was called Han Lin, and wasn't the reverse of this Ling Han? Ling Han knew that they were already suspicious of his identity. Thus, he didn't plan to hide it from them any longer. Anyhow, he trusted that they weren't big mouths who would go around telling everyone. He smiled, and said, guys, it's been 2 years. You all look quite well, huh? Xiao Sisi and the others were all moved. Fuck. It really is him. I was thinking it was you. However, I wasn't really sure, as you were only at the high extreme 2 years ago. Su Jing sighed with emotion and continued, it's only been 2 years, yet your cultivation level has already surpassed ours. That's unbelievable. I was just lucky, Ling Han said. Fuck. You're showing off. I can't get used to this. Drag him along for a drink. We have to get him drunk. Agreed. We definitely have to get him drunk. They dragged Ling Han to go drinking, and the Rain Emperor and Ding Ping naturally tagged along. To Ling Han's surprise, Xia Wuk also went along with them. He couldn't help but sigh with emotion. They had once been enemies, yet Xia Wuk's attitude toward him had seen a massive change. There was a small town under the Majestic Heaven sect, and it had restaurants, bars, and all the other necessary services. They paid for a private room, then started to drink to their heart's content. Ling Han mentioned the mystery realm that He Tao had invited him to enter together, and to his surprise, a lot of them already knew about this. You're probably referring to the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm. Xiao Sisi nodded, and continued, that's an ancient mystery realm, and it's one where Venerable Trinity personally broke open the outer layer of restrictive formations. If he hadn't done so, no one would be able to enter. However, Venerable Trinity himself isn't able to enter this mystery realm. According to rumors, doing so will either result in his death or result in the destruction of the entire mystery realm. There are numerous ancient treasures inside, and there are also some high-grade godly medicines. It's extremely attractive to cultivators. However, only those at the mountain river tier can enter, so many people purposefully suppress their cultivation in order to stay at this tier. Their aim is simply to enter this mystery realm a few more times. They wish to accumulate enough resources and comprehension for their future cultivation. Su Jing and the others all chimed in to explain the situation. They all had powerful backgrounds, and thus they were naturally more informed than Ling Han when it came to such secrets. However, I've heard that some powerful clans go even further. They specifically have some Sun-Moon tier elites sever their cultivation level and act as guards for their juniors. I've also heard about such practices, Xia Wuk said. Moreover, even though they've severed their cultivation level, they can still raise their power by ingesting some forbidden alchemical pills. Coupled with their comprehension that's already at the Sun-Moon tier, an increase in power naturally means that they're also able to wield higher tier regulations. Which means, they may as well still be at the Sun-Moon tier. Chapter 1163, Gao Faction. Ling Han was slightly astonished. People actually went to such great lengths for a mystery realm? This proved just how extraordinary that place was. Otherwise, why would those powerful forces make so many preparations? By the looks of it, I'll have to tag along with you guys when the mystery realm opens, he said with a smile. These prodigies were all successors of super-powerful forces. As such, they were extremely well informed regarding the situation inside the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm. Ling Han refused to believe that the forces behind them would remain inactive faced with the temptation of the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm. Perhaps those kinds of a mountain river tier cultivators would also follow them into the mystery realm. Hee hee. Xiao Sisi and the others all chuckled in reply. There was no need to lie to someone who already knew their secret. It was because they also engaged in such practices that they knew of these secrets. Brother Ling, you can ask for whatever you want if you're willing to join my Thousand Frost Majestic Empire. Xiao Sisi said. There was a glimmer in her bright eyes, an air of charm exuded from her body. Her promise, coupled with her gaze, was almost as if she were saying, I'll even consider marrying you. Hee hee, Brother Ling, I have a little sister, and she's a stunning beauty who's worth sacrificing nations and cities for. Duan said hurriedly. You together with her are a match made in heaven. I guarantee that I can earn a position of a duke for Brother Ling. Join the domineering Summer Majestic Empire, and we'll be blood brothers. Xia Wuk said. Ling Han had already proved his talent, he was worth this price. Although Ling Han had offended Yang Hao was only at the Sun-Moon tier. Moreover, his background wasn't any stronger than theirs. It could be said that as long as Yang Hao didn't reach the Eternal River tier, they needed not be afraid of him. Anyhow, even if he could reach the Eternal River tier, how many years later would that be? Yang Hao had only taken less than 1,000 years to reach the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. However, it was a huge and difficult leap to advance from the Sun-Moon tier to the Heavenly Body tier, to say nothing of the Eternal River tier. There was only a single Eternal River tier elite in the galaxy, and this proved just how extraordinarily difficult it was to reach this tier. Thus, his several hundred years lead over Ling Han would disappear in no time. In the future, advancing just a single tier would take him tens of thousands of years. A period of several centuries was nothing compared to this. Meanwhile, Ling Han skirted around their questions and avoided giving any answer. He already had his own force, so how could he join someone else's empire? In any case, even if were to join one, it would be the chaotic star's majestic empire. After all, even the Empress was his. Of course, he only dared to say this in his mind. Otherwise, the Eternity Sky Emperor, Jade Drop Emperor, and even a few members of the 7 generals might charge over to the Majestic Heavens sect to kill him. When the gathering concluded, Ling Han met up with the Rain Emperor, Feng Peyun, Murong Qing, and Helian Tianyun and started to drink again. Now that Ling Han had arrived, they could naturally cultivate under the reincarnation tree again. Meanwhile, Ling Han snuck out for a break and took Shui Yenyu to a field of flowers far away from the reincarnation tree. "Wife, our son is so fortunate," Ling Han said in admiration as he cupped his hands over her voluptuous breasts. Helian Xian Shui's breasts were pitifully small in comparison. It was with great fortune that her flat chest hadn't starved their son to death. Although they had already become one, Shui Yenyu was still easily embarrassed. Her face flushed red, and she turned around to bite his wrist, chiding, "Damn pervert." Her sparkling eyes were filled with affection. Ling Han's heart shuddered in excitement, and he said, "Thankfully I was shameless enough. Otherwise, how could such a beautiful teacher have become the mother of my child?" Shui Yenyu struggled weakly, and scolded, "If you weren't pervertedly groping me while saying this, perhaps I might have been moved. Now, however, I only want to bite this damn pervert to death." "Is your zodiac the dog? You're actually going to bite me?" A playful look flashed across his eyes, and he said, "If you like biting so much, I can teach you a new kind of game. I guarantee you'll be able to bite and nibble to your heart's content." He started to whisper in Shui Yenyu's ears, and her eyes instantly widened in astonishment. She couldn't help but leap up and jump on top of Ling Han's body. "Damn pervert. Stupid pervert. Shameless pervert." Ling Han laughed heartily, and said, "So, wife, it turns out that you like to take the lead. Come, your hubby will let you do as you please today." Shui Yenyu pinched him aggressively. Why did this person always tease her until she became utterly embarrassed? Gasp. "Say, wife, where are you pinching?" Ling Han purposefully clenched his teeth and sucked in a sharp breath. Shui Yenyu looked down, only to find that she had pinched his erect body. She was so embarrassed that she could barely look Ling Han in the eyes. "Hee hee, wife, I love it when you're like this," Ling Han said with a chuckle. "You're clearly a seductive beauty, yet you're so easily embarrassed. Damn pervert." After battling against Wuxia and Yang Hao, Ling Han naturally became renowned throughout the Majestic Heaven sect. Although Hu Feiyin's performance had been more stunning, everyone knew that her power was derived from the spiritual mark in her body. Her actual power was only a so-so. The next morning, an endless stream of people came to visit Ling Han. They wanted to become friends or at least become acquainted with him. Ling Han didn't act haughtily. Instead, he talked and joked with them, because in his eyes, these people were walking piggy banks. Those who could enter the Majestic Heavens sect were generally all successors of powerful forces. The only thing they weren't short on was money. He needed to earn money, so he had naturally placed his focus on alchemy. Once he refined pills, these people would become his customers. Ling Han chuckled gleefully. His attitude was warm and welcoming, and those who came to visit all felt flattered by his hospitality. They hadn't expected for Ling Han to be so modest and kind. Meanwhile, Shui Yenyu shook her head in pity. She knew Ling Han extremely well, so she naturally knew what he was thinking. These people are being treated as pigs for slaughter, yet they're still thanking Ling Han so profusely. Sure enough, they're being sold and still helping the seller count his profits. Then, her mind wandered to herself. Hadn't she also been willingly captured by him? This sweetheart. Her voice was embarrassed yet affectionate. Cough, this is Senior Brother Han, am I correct? A man in green walked over, and a look of amazement flashed across his face as his eyes swept over Shui Yenyu. He glanced at her once more before turning his eyes to Ling Han. Ling Han's impression of him was already at rock bottom. That's right, I'm Ling Han, he said indifferently. The man in green smiled haughtily, and said, I'm Gai Yongsi, and I've come from the Gao Faction. What Gao Faction? Ling Han hated it when others acted haughtily before him. He felt annoyed just looking at the smug face of the man in green. Gai Yongsi remained unfazed, and said, Senior Brother Han, you still don't know, do you? Our majestic heaven sect is actually split into several factions. Our founder took 9 disciples in total, and thus the factions led by them are the strongest. The Gao faction is one such faction. Ling Han was slightly astonished. Venerable Trinity didn't wish to dominate the galaxy, yet by the looks of it, his 9 disciples were definitely no peace lovers. Once the Venerable Trinity passed away, this galaxy would definitely descend into chaotic war, one which would require maps to be redrawn. So what? Ling Han said indifferently. A hint of anger crept onto Gai Yongsi's face. Hadn't Ling Han heard him say that he had come from the Gao faction, a faction that was founded by one of Venerable Trinity's disciples? However, he forcefully suppressed his anger upon remembering the objective of his visit. I've come on behalf of the young master to specially invite Senior Brother Han to join our Gao faction. Chapter 1164, Not Interested. I'm not interested, Ling Han answered without a moment of hesitation. Gai Yongsi faltered for a moment before saying, Senior Brother Han, don't you want to consider it for a little longer? Is there something wrong with your ears, or is there something wrong with your brain? Ling Han asked. Gai Yongsi was flabbergasted. Had he not explained clearly just then? He had said that he was inviting Ling Han to join the Gao faction on behalf of the young master. Do you know how magnificent the Gao faction is? He felt that he had to explain further, and so he continued, Lord Gao Feng, the faction leader, is the 4th disciple of the Venerable Trinity. Moreover, he's a super elite at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. In fact, there's a great chance he'll advance to the eternal river tier in the future. Gao Huang, the young master, is also an elite at the consummate level of the sun-moon tier. He'll definitely become a heavenly body tier paragon in the future. Ling Han almost burst into laughter. Equating a heavenly body tier elite to a paragon? Ludicrous. He shook his head, and said, Are you done yet? Han Lin, don't be an ungrateful wretch, Gai Yongsi said harshly. You have to realize that young master definitely won't take no for an answer. I'm so scared. Ling Han said with a smile. Gai Yongsi was furious. This person actually dared to tease Gao Huang's name one? He humphed, and said, If you offend young master, it will be difficult for you to take even a single step in the majestic heaven sect. Young master has only cultivated for 300,000 years, yet he's already reached the consummate level of the sun-moon tier. He can definitely break through to the heavenly body tier within 1 million years. This was indeed astonishing. Although 300,000 years seemed like a long time, those at the consummate level of the mountain river tier already had lifespans of 400,000 years. Meanwhile, the maximum lifespan of sun-moon tier elites could reach 4 million years. Thus, reaching the peak stage of the sun-moon tier in 300,000 odd years was definitely impressive. However, Ling Han didn't think much of it. One could indeed be labeled a prodigy if they reached the peak stage of the sun-moon tier within 300,000 years. This was quite an astonishing feat, after all. However, in the majestic heaven sect, achieving such a feat wasn't all that outstanding. Because this place didn't lack prodigies. If Gao Huang's father hadn't been a heavenly body tier elite, he wouldn't necessarily have reached the peak stage of the sun-moon tier so quickly. This was similar to Zhao Luan, who was talented, but not the most talented in the world. However, he still managed to reach the Sun-Moon tier within 1,000 years. Life would be a lot easier if one had a powerful father. However, even though Gao Huang had reached the peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier already, it would be almost impossible for him to break through to the heavenly body tier. If one wasn't talented enough, it would be impossible for them to reach the heavenly body tier even if they were trained by heavenly body tier elites. However, the Majestic Heavens sect had only been founded tens of thousands of years ago, and Venerable Trinity had spent all of his time battling on the two-realm battlefield before that. Thus, it was possible that his 9 great disciples had battled alongside him. If that was the case, perhaps Gao Huang had also participated in battle before. As such, it was possible that he was indeed quite talented. Ling Han waved a hand and said, "Okay, you've said everything that you wanted to say, so you can take your leave now. Go on, see yourself out." Yongsi shook in anger. This brat was truly arrogant and supercilious. "Why, you're far too arrogant," he stammered angrily. "You'll definitely regret this. Just wait and see." Ling Han's expression became cold, and he said, "You dare to threaten me?" He turned to Shui Yenyu and asked, "Wife, this dumb C***anti came to my house and threatened me, so what do you say I should do?" "Beat him to a pulp, of course." Ling Han answered his own question before Shui Yenyu could even reply. He flashed a wicked smile at Yongsi. Don't act recklessly." Yongsi felt a cold chill run down his spine. No need to be so modest. Ling Han immediately captured Yongsi. Then, loud thumps started to reverberate around his residence as he beat him to his heart's content. Ling Han was genuinely ticked off. This was his residence, yet this person had run over and demanded that he become someone else's underling. After being rejected, he had even dared to threaten him. Wasn't he asking for a beating? Why you? Don't forget that I'm a member of the Gao Faction. Yongsi shrieked through his anguished wails. "I'll beat you into submission." Ling Han laughed loudly as he continued to pummel Yongsi. Lackeys such as Yongsi naturally didn't possess much backbone. He started to beg for mercy after a while, and he wailed that he wouldn't dare threaten Ling Han ever again. Ling Han finally stopped and said, "I'll break your dog legs if you ever dare to set foot inside my residence again, understood?" Yongsi nodded frantically and said, "Understood. Understood." His only wish at this moment was to escape from this demonic lair. "Huh, fuck off then." Ling Han tossed him out of his residence. Yongsi stumbled and rolled as he hurriedly crawled up from the ground. He didn't dare speak another word, and he only turned around after running for a good 100 or so meters. He had initially wanted to throw down a threat, yet a cold chill gripped at his heart when he saw Ling Han's face. He swallowed the words that were already at the tip of his tongue before turning around and fleeing as quickly as he could. "How boring," Ling Han said with a shake of his head. Shui Yenyu also shook her head and said, "Even if you wanted to refuse, couldn't you have done it in a less offensive manner?" "I couldn't contain myself. Just looking at his smug face made me want to beat him," Ling Han said with a chuckle. Shui Yenyu sighed. She also knew Ling Han's temperament. However, it was because of his confidence and pride that he was able to improve in leaps and bounds. "Be careful," she said. Ling Han was already a seed, so the sect definitely had high hopes for him. Thus, they definitely wouldn't allow others to target him too much. It was just that he had to be extremely careful outside the sect. However, Ling Han had the Black Tower, so protecting himself couldn't be any easier. Shui Yenyu felt much more at ease upon thinking of this. Ling Han left his palace and headed to the town that sat at the foot of the mountain. He wanted to see if there were any higher-grade pill recipes. Everything was in place now, and he was only missing high-grade pill recipes that would allow him to refine divine pills and earn boatloads of money. He arrived at the town, and after walking around for a while, he saw the words, "Mo Clan Establishment." Is it that Mo Clan? He had been ambushed by several elites before and ended up drifting through the galaxy. It was thanks to his encounter with a Mo clan starship that he had been able to make it to the Flying Cloud planet. He walked into the store. A store attendant walked over and greeted, "Sir, are you looking for anything in particular? Our store has everything, from god tools to divine pills. Or perhaps you're looking for tool refining materials or alchemical materials. As long as you request it, there's nothing that we can't get you." Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Are there any pill recipes?" "Pill recipes?" The store attendant's expression revealed that he was somewhat troubled. Due to the special nature of cultivation techniques, pill recipes, and formations, they were rarely ever taken out and sold. "Are there none?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "How is that possible?" the store attendant said hurriedly. "However, there's only an extremely limited amount, and they're all especially dear." "Price isn't an issue," Ling Han said. He had sold many pills before he left, so he was genuinely not short on money right now. However, there were a lot of places where he needed to spend money. Had several brothers, disciples, and also a lover. Which of them didn't need cultivation resources? Most importantly, he needed an exorbitant amount of godly metal to raise the level of his divine demon sword. How expensive was godly metal? "I can't decide myself. I need to report it to the manager of the store." The store attendant didn't dare to sell the pill recipes himself. "No problem," Ling Han said with a nod. It wasn't long before an elder at the consummate level of the mountain river tier walked out. A smile appeared on his face when he saw Ling Han, and he said, "Oh, it's young Master Han." Ling Han was slightly puzzled, and he said, "You know who I am?" "Naturally. Young Master Han is a rising star of the Majestic Heaven sect," the elder complimented. "If I'm unaware of such matters, how can I do business?" "That's right, you wanted to buy pill recipes?" "Correct," Ling Han said with a nod. There was a glimmer in the elder's eyes, and he said, "This might be rude, but may I ask if you're planning to refine pills yourself?" Chapter 1165, Good Faith. Ling Han hesitated for a moment. However, upon recalling how the Mo clan had helped him, he didn't hide the truth, and said, "That's right, I'm going to refine pills myself." The elder was astonished, and the smile on his face grew even larger. "Young Master Han, this elder wants to do some business with you." "That's right, my surname is also Han." "What a coincidence. My name in just a single word, Hua." "Oh, so it's Manager Han." Ling Han greeted the elder before saying, "What business does Manager Han want to do with me? I can give you a few pill recipes free of charge. However, when you succeed in refining the alchemical pills, I hope that you can sell them through us." Ling Han faltered for a moment before feeling a sense of admiration for Han Huo. As expected of a businessman. It looked like Manager Han was being extremely generous, but this wasn't entirely the case. Pill recipes were indeed a type of resource, though it could be argued that it was a worthless type of resource. After all, it was extremely easy to make copies of pill recipes. Thus, there was actually no loss for the Mo clan establishment in it. Moreover, even if they didn't make a cent off selling Ling Han's pills, they could still bring in a huge customer flow. Pills were essential goods to cultivators. Also, since cultivators came to buy pills, perhaps they would also buy some other items along the way. Even if they bought just one more item, the Mo clan establishment would still have made a profit. In addition, they would become acquainted with Ling Han, a super genius, just for the price of a few pill recipes which they wouldn't lose money off anyway. There was absolutely no loss for the Mo clan establishment. No wonder the Mo clan is able to spread its establishments throughout the galaxy. They're indeed good at seizing opportunities and acting in good faith. However, Han Huo didn't know just how important his sincere offer was, nor did he know just how much help he would bring the establishment. Ling Han was the Alchemy Emperor. Ling Han smiled and said, "No problem. Then I'll thank Manager Han for the pill recipes first." Han Huo was delighted upon hearing Ling Han's reply. In reality, he hadn't given this as much thought as Ling Han had merely wanted to become acquainted and be on good terms with Ling Han. After all, this was a profitable agreement, and they could also acquaint themselves with a young king tier on top of that. As for Ling Han saying that he could refine pills, Manager Han didn't actually take this to heart. After all, how could someone be so prodigious? If one had such terrifying cultivation ability, they wouldn't also be a genius in alchemy, right? Thus, saying that he would sell pills for Ling Han was naturally just a polite way of flattering him. What level pill recipe does young Master Han want? Han Huo asked. Level 5, Ling Han replied. He could already refine level 4 divine pills, and thus his next target was obviously refining level 5 divine pills. Han Huo was taken aback with surprise. Level 5? If you want to muck around, level 1 divine pills are already more than enough. What's the point of playing with level 5 divine pills? Even if you're a seed of the Majestic Heaven sect, and even if you receive a lot of resources, alchemy will suck your resources dry in no time at all. This is especially the case with high-grade alchemical pills. Ling Han smiled widely as he retrieved a pill vial and handed it to Manager Han. These are mysterious azure pills and jade heaven pills that I've refined. If you could please sell them for me, Manager Han. Han Huo was a little baffled as he accepted the pill vial. Only after staring at them for a while did he realize that Ling Han wasn't kidding around. Mysterious azure pill. This was a level 4 divine pill. Gasp. Could it be that Han Lin is genuinely an alchemist? And a high-ranked one at that? He didn't dare treat this matter lightly, and he hurriedly opened the vials and carefully appraised the pills. The Mo clan establishment sold everything and anything, so Han Huo naturally knew a lot about alchemy. He immediately determined that these pills were exactly what Ling Han had said they were. They were indeed real. Did Han Lin truly refine these? Han Huo chose to believe the affirmative. He was actively trying to acquaint the Mo clan establishment with Ling Han anyway, wasn't he? He nodded, and said, "Please wait for a moment, young Master Han. I'll retrieve the pill recipes for you right away. These are fairly valuable pill recipes, so I don't keep them on me lest I accidentally lose them." "No worries. I understand, Manager Han." Han Huo returned after a while, and he handed a small booklet to Ling Han. Ling Han accepted it and glanced at the cover, on which the words 7 Ultimate Flying Flame Pill were printed. He roughly skimmed over its contents and found that the booklet was all about the materials needed and the refinement process of the 7 Extreme Flying Flame Pill. In fact, the refinement process took up 90% of the booklet. The refinement process of high-grade divine pills was extremely complex. As such, it wasn't abnormal for such pill recipes to take up an entire booklet. The 7 Ultimate Flying Flame Pill can elevate the battle prowess of those who practice fire element cultivation techniques by 2 stars. 2 stars. Ling Han was astonished when he read the introduction of the pill. One had to realize that most cultivators were only run-of-the-mill. One surpassing 1 star was already impossibly difficult, let alone surpassing 2 stars. Although this pill wasn't helpful to his cultivation, he didn't require level 5 divine pills yet anyway. However, if he succeeded in refining this pill, they would definitely be treated as treasures by those who practiced fire element cultivation techniques. Moreover, Sun Moon tier elites definitely weren't short on money. They could afford to buy these pills. "Young Master Han, what do you think about this pill recipe?" Han Huo asked. "It's fine," Ling Han said with a nod. "Just a word of warning, young Master Han. This 7 Ultimate Flying Flame Pill is extremely difficult to refine. I've heard that even many level 6 alchemists can't refine this pill. So, please don't spend too much time on this pill. After all, young Master Han is a cultivation prodigy." "I understand," Ling Han said. Manager Han was telling him that out of goodwill, so he naturally wouldn't become angry. Moreover, his words were indeed true. At the end of the day, cultivation was still the most important. However, little did Han Huo know that Ling Han actually possessed a reincarnation tree. This was a heaven-defying divine tree. They started to discuss the fine details of their collaboration off course. All of this was built on the assumption that Ling Han could successfully refine the 7 ultimate flying flame pill. Han Huo didn't have much confidence in Ling Han, and thus he offered him a large cut of the profits, 90%, to be exact. He had initially planned to give all of the profits to Ling Han, and it was actually Ling Han who had taken a step back and offered them 10% of the profits. Han Huo genuinely didn't believe that Ling Han could succeed. Thus, he naturally didn't mind giving all of the profits away. It was just thin air, after all. Ling Han needed an exorbitant amount of true origin stones as he needed to purchase godly metal to raise the level of his divine demon sword. That being the case, he purchased the materials needed for refining the 7 ultimate flying flame pill, and then returned to the majestic heaven sect. He immediately entered the Black Tower to comprehend the pill recipe under the reincarnation tree. The steps to pill refinement were actually very easy to grasp. This simply involved the order of placing ingredients, as well as how to control the flames. Even ordinary people could follow these steps. Even if the steps were more difficult, grasping them was still only a matter of time. However, making the divine patterns of the ingredients intertwine was much more difficult, and was not something that anyone could do. Only those with a powerful divine sense and meticulous control could complete this process. In fact, this process involved millions upon billions of possible variations. As such, ordinary people wouldn't be able to grasp this process even if they spent their entire lives studying it. Even level 5 and level 6 alchemists would need hundreds of years to fully grasp it. Thus, it was only understandable that Han Huo doubted Ling Han's ability to successfully refine this pill in the short term. Meanwhile, Ling Han was brimming with confidence. He had the reincarnation tree. The leaves of the reincarnation tree rustled, and Ling Han entered a state of meditation. He simulated the pill refinement process in his mind again and again, again and again. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time quietly crept by. Chapter 1166, Stunned Han Huo. 1 day under the reincarnation tree was equivalent to 1 year in the outside world. 7 days passed, and Ling Han made his first attempt to refine the 7 ultimate flying flame pill. He naturally failed. Reality and expectations still differed by quite a bit. Ling Han didn't immediately make a new attempt. Instead, he chose to meditate for 2 days. In other words, he spent 2 years analyzing the reason for his failure. Only after this did he start a new attempt. He failed again. However, Ling Han only spent a few hours analyzing his failure this time. He started his 3rd attempt. Success. However, he only managed to concoct 2 pills. Theoretically speaking, 1 cauldron could yield a maximum of 4 7 ultimate flying flame pills. Ling Han had successfully refined 2, so he was already halfway to success. This was an outstanding result. However, he was extremely dissatisfied when he observed these 2 pills more closely. This was because they were of relatively low quality. In fact, Ling Han felt an urge to throw these 2 pills away. He was the Alchemy Emperor, so what face did he have to give these pills to others? However, he slowly lowered his raised arm. He was too poor. Regardless of their quality, these 2 pills could still be sold for tens of thousands of true origin stones. It would be a pity to throw them away just like this. Sigh, why am I so poor? Ling Han rubbed his chin, and then looked at his divine demon sword. How much money would he need to spend in order to raise the level of his divine demon sword? However, I'll receive a god tool that truly belongs to me. So, it's all worth it in the end. The Black Tower was indeed impressive, yet he could only use it as a spatial god tool. He couldn't unleash its powerful offensive abilities. Thus, it wasn't necessarily better to have a high-level god tool. What was more important was how much of the god tool's power one could unleash. I'll refine more. Ling Han had purchased enough ingredients to refine 5 cauldrons of pills. He had wanted to buy more, but he was strapped for cash, so he could only settle with this amount. His 4th attempt yielded 3 7 ultimate flying flame pills, and during his 5th attempt, he finally achieved a perfect yield of 4 pills. Although his improvements seemed incredible, he had needed to reflect and analyze under the reincarnation tree after each attempt. It was through this process that he was able to correct his mistakes. Thus, the quality of the pills in the 5th cauldron also saw a marked improvement. In fact, they were bordering on perfection. Ling Han smiled, and mused to himself, will Manager Han be stunned when he sees these pills? Only a month had passed, yet he had already refined 9 7 ultimate flying flame pills. Moreover, 4 of them were of perfect quality. Successfully refining a cauldron of 7 ultimate flying flame pills took 5 days. This refinement time was typical for level 5 divine pills. However, it was rumored that divine pills above level 9 would take at least half a year to refine. A tiny error could destroy months or even years of hard work. My cultivation level hasn't gone up by much, but my divine sense has become far stronger, Ling Han murmured to himself. He had been refining pills for the past few weeks, so he naturally didn't have any time to cultivate. As such, his origin power remained on roughly the same level. However, alchemy was extremely taxing on one's divine sense, and it could be viewed as a kind of tempering. Let me sell these pills first. I need to earn enough money to raise this divine demon sword to level 4. This was Ling Han's short-term goal. Raising the sword to level 5 could be left for the future, for he still hadn't broken through to the Sun-Moon tier yet. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, only to hear Fan Ru say that messengers from the Gao Faction had already visited several times. However, Ling Han had been cultivating in seclusion, so they could only leave in discontentment. It was rumored that Gao Huang had become furious, even releasing a statement saying that Ling Han had to personally beg for an audience with the Gao Faction. The time limit for this. Yesterday was already the last day. Ling Han shook his head, and said, is he a dumb C***NT? He ignored the matter and left his palace. He arrived at the town at the foot of the mountain, and then headed to the Mo clan establishment. Young Master Ling. Han Huo just so happened to be on the ground floor, and he faltered for a moment upon seeing Ling Han. Then, a puzzled expression appeared on his face. Why has this prodigy come again? Has he given up after studying the pill recipe and realizing that he can't possibly refine it? Has he come to exchange the level 5 pill recipe for an easier pill recipe? In his mind, this was reasonable and fair. Ling Han retrieved a vial of pills, and said, Manager Han, could you please sell these pills for me? Han Huo didn't think much of this. He accepted the vial of pills, and asked, Young Master Han, are these still mysterious azure pill? Oh, that's right, the pills that you handed me last time have all sold out already. Moreover, they made quite a big profit. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, no, these aren't mysterious azure pills. They're 7 ultimate flying flame pills. Pooh. Han Huo instantly spluttered loudly before coughing non-stop. His entire face became red. Is he joking? It's only been a month, yet he's successfully refined the 7 ultimate flying flame pill already? Impossible. Definitely impossible. Although this was a level 5 divine pill, it was extraordinarily difficult to refine. In fact, even level 6 alchemists would avoid refining this pill. However, Ling Han had successfully refined it in just a mere month. Was this some kind of joke? Young Master Han, you're quite the joker, he said with a chuckle. Ling Han also chuckled, and said, indeed, I do enjoy joking around. Han Huo breathed a sigh of relief before curiously asking, then what pills have you refined this time? He was slightly puzzled. Wasn't Ling Han studying the pill recipe for the 7 ultimate flying flame pill? Why was he suddenly refining some other pill? He opened the vial and poured several crimson-red pills into his hand. To his astonishment, it felt as if these pills were burning. Not only were they radiating heat, but one could also see the flames that were licking over their bodies. If he were an ordinary person, a hole would have been instantly burned into his palm. The temperature of these pills was insanely high. Perhaps even those at the flower blossom tier wouldn't dare to touch these pills. However, Han Huo was at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, so this level of heat was naturally no problem for him. Even so, the astonishment on his face was more pronounced than if his palm were to be burned. How could he not be astonished? These were fucking 7 ultimate flying flame pills. Young Master Han, are you sure you're not joking around with me? Han Huo's face twitched, and it looked as if he were going to faint at any moment. Ling Han laughed loudly as he patted Han Huo's shoulder, and said, Manager Han, you need to work on your sense of humor. Although their age differed by tens of thousands of years, Ling Han's cultivation level was above that of Han Huo. Thus, according to the rules of the cultivation world, he was actually Han Huo's senior. As such, it wasn't demeaning for him to pat Han Huo's shoulders. Han Huo examined the pills carefully. He was an expert appraiser, and he immediately determined that the 9 pills were freshly refined. The 7 ultimate flying flame pill had a unique attribute: the fresher it was, the greener the flames on its surface. As it became older, these flames would gradually become blue, then red, and then eventually purple-black. When the pills became purple-black, it signified that they were already too old, with much of their effects having already been lost. In other words, the pills would be as good as useless. Han Huo was almost about to cry. These are genuinely 7 ultimate flying flame pills. And fresh ones at that. Has Ling Han truly succeeded? What kind of freak is he? Young Master Han, did you truly succeed? No, what you're seeing is just an illusion, Ling Han said with a smile. Han Huo finally understood his sense of humor this time. Young Master Han, you almost shocked me to death. It's only been a month, yet you've already refined the 7 ultimate flying flame pill. This is a peerless feat with no precedent. Although he was purposefully flattering Ling Han, his words weren't all that exaggerated. After all, if Ling Han didn't have the reincarnation tree, he would have definitely needed a dozen or so years to fully comprehend the pill recipe. When cultivators reached the immortal level, their lifespan would increase significantly. However, attempting to comprehend secret techniques, formations, pill recipes, and such could easily take them hundreds of years as well. This was especially astonishing. Chapter 1167, Forgotten the warning last time? Ling Han laughed, and then seriously said, Shopkeeper Han, I need you to do me a favor, and that is to gather as much level 3 godly metal as possible. Use my profits to pay for it. No problem. Han Huo cleverly did not ask why Ling Han was gathering so much godly metal, but rather agreed immediately with confidence. I shall trouble you then, Shopkeeper Han. I am willing to work for you, young Master Han. Ling Han nodded, and bought some other materials. He still had to refine the 7 ultimate flying flame pill, that was the source of his income. Han Huo wiped away his sweat as he accompanied Ling Han in his selection of materials. He had not come out of the shocked state he had previously been in. Ling Han smiled, and said, Shopkeeper Han, are you regretting our agreement from just now? You take 10% and I take 90%, so you think that it is a great loss? How could that be? Han Huo shook his head hurriedly. Though he felt great heartache, as an outstanding businessman, he knew that Ling Han could have completely not handed the 7 ultimate flying flame pills for them to sell on his behalf. Would they fear that no one would buy such an alchemical pill? Just give a holler, and it was guaranteed that they would be able to sell as many as they had in their stock. Furthermore, Ling Han had been completely capable of taking all the profits at first, yet had still deliberately let the Mo clan business have 10% share. This was a massive favor. Han Huo was naturally clear about that. Could it be that Ling Han did not have a clear understanding of his own alchemy abilities? When he absolutely knew he was able to concoct the 7 ultimate flying flame pills, he still let them have 10% of the profits. How many others could have done this? I am filled with endless gratitude for young Master Han's kindness. He did not understand why Ling Han would look after the Mo clan establishment so much, though. Ling Han nodded, and said, "On my way to the Majestic Heaven sect, someone ambushed me, and I lost my way in the galaxy. Thankfully, I encountered a trade vessel from the Mo clan, and they did not abandon me, but rather gave me a lift." Only now did Han Huo understand. He couldn't help but clasp in hands in respect, and said, "Young Master Han is really a man of character." To the Mo clan, this was merely an insignificant act of lending a helping hand, yet they had obtained the friendship of a young king tier in exchange. This transaction was really too profitable. Furthermore, this was also because Ling Han knew to repay their kindness. Otherwise, if he fell out with them and became hostile, what could they do? Ling Han smiled, and said, "Shopkeeper Han, please proceed with my request as soon as possible. Don't worry about the type of level 3 godly metal. Even if it is old and worn, or impure, it is fine. As long as its quality has reached level 3, it is acceptable. I will take note. Please come back a month later, young Master Han. I will definitely give you a pleasant surprise, young Master Han," Han Huo said confidently. He decided to report Ling Han's matter to the higher-ups of the Mo clan. In the first place, a young king tier would be worth enticing, what more when it was Ling Han, a man of such character who placed importance on emotion and righteousness. He would report this to the higher-ups of the Mo clan, and ask them to endlessly gather godly metal for Ling Han. Mere level 3 godly metal was enough to obtain the friendship of a young king tier. This was really too profitable. Furthermore, Ling Han's achievements in alchemy were really too frightening. He could concoct level 5 divine pills in a mere month, and it wasn't just a single furnace's worth. Hiss, I actually forgot. Young Master Han is still in Mountain River tier, so how could he manage to concoct level 5 divine pills? Is forming the 5th Mountain River equivalent to Sun Moon tier? Cultivating both alchemy and martial arts, and excelling in both. Our Mo clan must definitely not let such a genius slip. Perhaps this young man would be able to rule the whole world. We must spare no expense to be tied to him. Han Huo mumbled. Though his surname was not Mo, he was still a member of the Mo clan because he had married into the Mo clan. His children and grandchildren all had the surname Mo. Ling Han walked casually. Now that there was a reliable source of godly metal, this caused him to be in a very great mood. Next, he should prepare with the matters of the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm, and when the journey to this mystery realm ended, he should be about ready to break through to the Sun Moon tier. Once he broke through to the Sun Moon tier, he would set out to find the location of the 5 sects and the Rock Palace. He couldn't drag things on forever. Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, it's been centuries since we've last met. Who knew how she was like now? When she saw him once again, she would definitely be very surprised, wouldn't she? Not only was he a dead man revived, the rate at which he advanced through the cultivation levels was practically unbelievable as well. Merely 1,000 years, and he was already in the Sun Moon tier. This should have surpassed the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the Sword Emperor. Having been bullied by this hateful woman for a few decades, it was about time for his turn to counterattack. How could he let her off without thrashing her pert bottom? His son should also be quite grown by now. What about his parents? The little girl, Hun Huo, should be more and more womanly, right? What about Helian Sun Shui, Zhu Xian Er, Liu Tong, and Li Si Chan? He sighed. Though not many years had passed in this lifetime, the emotional debts he had incurred had far surpassed those from the 2 centuries he had lived in his previous life. On the way to the Majestic Heaven sect, Ling Han decided to stuff all his romantic debts back to the bottom of his heart. In comparison, nothing was more important than the longing for power. Only with enough ability would he be able to do what he wanted to do, or it was even merely for him to be capable of breathing a few breaths of air freely. Han Lin. A fierce shout rang out from afar. He looked over, and saw that there were 4 people standing at the doorway to his palace. All of them looked angered, and he recognized 2 of them. One was Fu Lianya, whereas the other was Gai Yongsi. Why were they here again? Han Lin, this is your last chance. Young Master Gao has said that if you make your way to Thousand Birds Peak on your knees today, he can forgive your previous disrespect, Gai Yongsi declared arrogantly. Ling Han looked at him strangely, and said, Are you a very forgetful person? Are you asking for another beating? Han Lin, a middle-aged man, spoke up, his voice deep and low like the boom of thunder. The moment he opened his mouth, a terrifying aura was released. This was not because he was born with a domineering air, but rather because he had used the suppression ability of a superior cultivation level. Sun Moon Tier. No wonder Gai Yongsi was braver today. So it seemed that he had gotten a strong helper. Meanwhile, Fu Lianya smirked coldly. He, too, had joined the Gao Faction, and when he knew that they were going to deal with Ling Han, he immediately took the initiative to ask to come along. That was because he wanted to see how Ling Han was going to yield in the face of superior power. It was all right even if he did not yield, as he would definitely be humiliated then. Indeed, Sun Moon Tier cultivators could not freely make a move on Mountain River Tier cultivators. After all, not everyone's name was Yang Hao. However, if elites of Sun Moon Tier made some moves secretly, suppressing Ling Han's cultivation level, and then let other Mountain River Tier cultivators subdue him, who would be able to say anything? Ling Han walked over, opened the doors, walked in, and then moved to close them. Pooh! Gai Yongsi and the others almost went mad with fury. What did he mean? Could it be that they were empty air to be ignored just like that? Han Lin. Gai Yongsi pressed his hands on the doors, stopping Ling Han from closing the doors. In the Majestic Heavens sect, there was one taboo that could absolutely not be broken. Without obtaining permission, it was forbidden to enter the rooms of another. You could fight at other times, it was all right. After all, cultivators increased their abilities through battle. However, if one's seclusion was disturbed, that could possibly cripple him. This was something that the sect definitely would not allow. Hence, usually, as long as the 2 sides were of equal cultivation levels, they could fight as much as they liked. There was definitely no one who would stop them, but once they returned to their quarters, which was an absolute sanctuary, none would be permitted to do anything. Even Yang Hao would not dare to break this kind of taboo. This was the bottom line. Thus, upon seeing Ling Han walk into his quarters, Gai Yongsi was naturally worried. Ling Han broke into a grin, stretched out a hand to grab him, and Gai Yongsi was swiftly subdued. Apparently, you have forgotten my warning from last time, and have come again. Chapter 1168, The Pitiful Gai Yongsi. Gai Yongsi felt terribly aggrieved. Fuck, it wasn't him who had chosen to enter these doors. It was Ling Han who dragged him in, all right? How could he be so unreasonable? Pa! He had barely finished this thought when he was slapped heavily by Ling Han. With such a bad memory, looks like your memory won't improve without another beating. Lord Zhu, save me. Gai Yongsi hurriedly asked for help from that Sun Moon Tier elite. That elite of Sun Moon Tier had the surname of Zhu, with the given name of Tianqiu. Though he was merely in the middle stage of the low extreme, it was sure that even if Ling Han had cultivated the 5th Mountain River Tier to perfection, the former would still be able to suppress him easily. There was a gap of a whole major tier, after all. His nose was almost bent in fury. First, Ling Han closed the doors in their faces, and now, he captured a hostage right under his nose. To what extent was Ling Han looking down on him? Let him go, he commanded darkly. There were multiple streams of frost entwining around his whole body. He was truly in a thunderous rage by now, and could not stop the origin power within his body from gushing out. Ling Han laughed, and asked, "And what if I don't? In front of me, you have no right to refuse." Zhu Tianqiu took a step forwards. Boom, the mighty aura of sun-moon tear gushed forth like an ocean. He, take a look at what's under your feet. Ling Han said, pointing at the doorstep. This is my territory. Without getting my approval, you almost stepped over this doorstep. Do you know what kind of punishment you would have to face? Involuntarily, Zhu Tianshou's feet paused. This was a taboo that no one in the whole sect could break, not even if it was those few personal disciples of Venerable Trinity. Pa! Ling Han raised his hand, which then fell sharply, giving Gai Yongsi another slap. He had put great force behind this strike, and Gai Yongsi opened his mouth and spat out blood along with a piece of broken tooth. Zhu Tianshou almost jumped up. Was this brat deliberately provoking him? He had gone too far. As the saying went, hitting the dog depended on the owner one. He was standing right here, just 3 meters away from Ling Han, yet this guy actually dared to hit his crony. How was that different from actually directly slapping him in the face? Fu Liangye, meanwhile, felt cold creep up in his heart. Could it be that this guy's a maniac? Ling Han had already offended Yang Hao, and had now also completely offended the Gao faction as well. Was he tired of living? But to become enemies with this kind of maniac, how dangerous was that? He was really afraid by now. Why did he have to be this daring, acting as vanguard? Even if he'd wanted to watch the show, he could have taken out a stool and watched the proceedings from afar. Pa! Ling Han delivered another palm strike, and Gai Yongsi once again spat out a broken tooth. With the force in his hand, he could have easily broken all of Gai Yongsi's teeth with a single palm strike, but he chose to break one with a single strike. Obviously, this was deliberate on his part. Zhu Tianshou was trembling all over. He sinisterly threatened, "Let go of him, and I will spare you today." Haha. Ling Han laughed loudly, and pointed at Zhu Tianshou. People like you all have something wrong inside your brains. It was you people who came to my place to strut around, and you are actually saying that you would spare me? TSK, tisk. Pa! He slapped Gai Yongsi again. Poor guy, he broke another tooth naturally, which he spat out along with a mouthful of blood. Gai Yongsi felt that he was really too wronged. It was Zhu Tianshou who was threatening Ling Han, so why was the one being beaten him? But could he talk reason with Ling Han? This guy was obviously a demon king. Han Lin. Zhu Tianshou felt almost suffocated with his fury. Pointing at Ling Han, he exclaimed, "Do you still want to stay in the sect?" "Sigh, you are threatening me again." Ling Han sighed. Pa! His hand fell again, and Gai Yongsi's 4th tooth was sent flying. "Lord Zhu, please don't say anything else." Gai Yongsi cried. "You guys are arguing, but why is it that I am on the receiving end of punishment?" Zhu Tianshou humphed. Why did this guy not have even the slightest backbone? True, if this guy had a backbone, how could he have possibly become Gao Huang's henchman? It should be known that among those who could be accepted into the sect, was anyone not filled with soaring pride and self-confidence? Even if they were willing to join the Gao faction, they merely wanted to make use of the resources and network of the Gao faction to enlarge their own relationship network. Which one of them would be extremely deferential towards Gao Huang? In terms of background, the majority of the people here had heavenly body tier elites supporting them in the background. None of them needed to be afraid of Gao Huang. The only difference was the latter's heavenly body tier backer was inside the sect, and he was also capable of coming into contact with great elites of Eternal River tier. But no matter what, Gai Yongsi was still a lackey of the Gao faction. His being bullied by an outsider was a humiliation to the whole Gao faction. Zhu Tianshou moved, regulations transforming into divine chains that moved to wind around Ling Han. He wanted to capture both Ling Han and Gai Yongsi and drag them both outside. Ling Han snickered, and placed Gai Yongsi in front of him as a human shield. Ah! Gai Yongsi yelled in pain. His body had been penetrated by over a dozen divine chains, and one had even stabbed right into his bottom, causing even purple veins to pop on his neck. This was really having a stick up his asterisk. "Come here." Zhu Tianqiu dragged the divine chains back, but Ling Han had hold of Gai Yongsi's arm, and would not let go. In terms of power, Ling Han was definitely no match for Sun Moon Tier, but the crucial thing here was that Gai Yongsi's physique could not sustain Ling Han's power either. Being pulled from both sides like this, he instantly released a terrible scream, feeling like he was about to be torn in half by the pure force. Zhu Tianqiu gritted his teeth. In any case, Gai Yongsi was an immortal, so even if his body was torn in two, he would not die. What was important now was to take back the hostage. Otherwise, as long as he was in Ling Han's hands, the Gao faction would continue to have their face slapped. With a ripping sound, blood spurted. Ah! Gai Yongsi released a pitiful scream. His whole person had been torn in half, but the larger half had still been taken back by Zhu Tianqiu. Finally, he had freed himself from Ling Han's control. Yo, sorry about that. Ling Han said, grinning. Sorry, your sister. Do you have the slightest bit of sincerity on your face? If Gai Yongsi had enough power, he'd surely want to strangle Ling Han to death now, but because he did not, he could only swallow his ire, and did not dare to show even the slightest temper. He hurriedly took out an alchemical pill and swallowed it, channeling his origin power to stimulate the medicinal effects. Zhu Tianqiu's eyes were cold and malevolent. He glared at Ling Han, but this was Ling Han's quarters, so he could not move without the slightest scruple. Otherwise, if he even damaged a single tile, he would be in for a great deal of suffering. He took a deep breath, and forcefully suppressed the flames of rage burning in his heart. He said, Young master told me to pass on a message. If you want to repair the relationship with the Gao faction, then you must bring at least 3 drops of thousand source true fluid out after entering the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm to be presented to young master. After he said thus, he left without even turning back. Fu Lianya and the other person quickly followed on his heels. If they were left behind, then wouldn't they only be violently thrashed by Ling Han? Wait for me. Gai Yongsi could not bother with healing his injuries anymore. He was already so severely injured, and had no further desire to be beaten by Ling Han worse. This Gao Huang wanted to recruit me, most probably, his initial motive was the thousand source true fluid, right? Ling Han mumbled. Something that even the son of a heavenly body tier elite kept in his mind constantly, huh? What kind of treasure would that be? I'll ask someone. He went back into his palace, and had Fan Ru guard the doors. No one was allowed to come and disturb him. Then, he entered into the Black Tower, and asked Notionless Saint. Chapter 1169, Thousand Source True Fluid. Thousand Source True Fluid? Notionless Saint thought for a moment, and then replied, after an immortal of Eternal River tier dies, the violence in his blood will be worn away after a very, very long time, and if the essence within has not been completely lost, it could possibly become thousand source true fluid. For immortals below Eternal River tier, this is a precious treasure. Every drop of thousand source true fluid would contain the comprehension that the immortal in Eternal River tier had about the Tao of heaven and earth, and could aid an immortal in improving his cultivation level, which is pretty good. Realization dawned on Ling Han. No wonder Gao Huang was so anxious about the thousand source true fluid, he had already reached the peak stage of Sun Moon tier, after all. However, how utterly difficult was it to take the one step toward the heavenly body tier? Even his father, who was similarly in the heavenly body tier, had no way to do anything. After Gao Huang consumed these 3 drops of thousand source true fluid, he might even have a chance of breaking through to the heavenly body tier. Though Ling Han had never seen this Gao Huang before, judging by his actions, this man had to be a very greedy character. Furthermore, since it was related to such an important matter like the breakthrough to the heavenly body tier, it was naturally best to have as much thousand source true fluid as possible. And Gao Huang actually said he merely wanted 3 drops. What did that mean? The difficulty level of obtaining the thousand source true fluid had to be incredibly high. Thus, with Gao Huang's greed, he wanted only 3 drops. Sun Moon tier cultivators are not able to enter into the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm. Hence, he sought elites of Mountain River tier everywhere, having others find thousand source true fluid for him. Ling Han shook his head. What an extremely selfish person. What right does he have to ask others to give up treasures that they have obtained with such difficulty? Ling Han could barely bother to get angry, and once again began to concoct alchemical pills. Before entering into the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm, he first had to upgrade the Divine Demon Sword up to level 4. This required an extremely large amount of true origin stones. This time, Ling Han did not spend all his time on alchemical concoction. He would take out some time for cultivation to improve his origin power and body art. Only if he himself was strong would he have true power. However, after merely half a month, Ling Han was forced to call a halt to his alchemy. Yuan Shenghe was about to break through. He could not allow Yuan Shenghe to appear for no conceivable reason and endure the heavenly tribulation in the sect. Thus, Ling Han left the sect all by himself, then summoned the cloud-piercing shuttle once more, and went to a distant place. He then released Yuan Shenghe so that he could endure the tribulation there. Because his foundations were very solid, added with the fact that Yuan Shenghe's natural talent was very extraordinary, he naturally endured the heavenly tribulation easily, which meant Ling Han had another immortal on his side. Qin Yi also encountered no problem in enduring the tribulation. However, in the case of Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiao, there was a bit of difficulty. It couldn't be helped. In terms of talent, these two were really a bit too ordinary. In a small world, they could still barely be considered geniuses, but ordinarily speaking, they should have been limited to the flower blossom tier. But now, Ling Han had forcibly pushed them up to shattering void tier, and they might even possibly break through to the immortal level. This caused the two of them to feel like their own power was slightly beyond their own control. So, they would probably only be able to reach the Mountain River tier. Or so Ling Han thought. Qin Yi and Yuan Shenghe still had space for further improvement, but as for Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiao, that would be that. He returned to the Majestic Heaven sect, and continued to cultivate earnestly in seclusion. When the deadline of 1 month had arrived, he brought the alchemical pills he had concocted to the Mo clan establishment. So much godly metal. Ling Han was surprised. The spatial spirit tool that Han Huo had handed him was filled to the brim with godly metal. Though he knew that alchemical pills were very profitable, could it really be as profitable as this? Ho, I reported young Master Han's matter to the clan, and the clan issued a command to me, which was to do my utmost to complete young Master Han's mission, Han Huo said with a smile. I have spent the whole month gathering godly metal. Besides that, the clan is also mobilizing our members to transport godly metal from other locations. As long as young Master Han does not say it is enough, the supply of godly metal will not stop. Ling Han smiled, and said, Aren't you all afraid that I will not be able to concoct enough alchemical pills to repay this debt? As long as young Master Han is happy, what would merely some godly metal be worth? Han Huo declared proudly. The Mo clan could be considered the largest business establishment in this whole galaxy. Though Han Huo's words were a bit exaggerated, he did indeed have the confidence to say them. Ling Han was surprised. The Mo clan actually had such a high opinion of him, investing so much in him before he had even broken through to the Sun Moon tier. It should be known that the least scarce resource in this world were geniuses, and it was very easy for them to wilt halfway to the peak. It could only be said that Mo clan was really filthy rich, and they were capable of taking the risk of losing the investment. Furthermore, once Ling Han became a great elite of the heavenly body tier in future, the rewards that the Mo clan would reap would be astonishing. If Ling Han could go even further, and reach the Eternal River tier, the Mo clan was really about to soar. Thank you. Ling Han did not play coy. He was confident that he would be able to reach the heavenly body tier, Eternal River tier, or even Genesis tier. The amount that the Mo clan had invested in him today would definitely reap them a very heavy fruit in future. When he returned to the Majestic Heaven sect, Ling Han began to improve the grade of the divine demon sword. Slash, 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 slash. In merely less than half a day, all the godly metal had been turned into scrap metal, and the divine demon sword was still far from reaching level 4. The higher the grade, the more godly metal was needed for it to advance further. Moreover, it was not just a little bit more. Ling Han could only wait longer. Thankfully, there was still more than 3 months' time until the time the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm would open. The Majestic Heavens sect had also begun to distribute the entrance slots for entering into the Mystery Realm. Aside from the disciples at the Mountain River tier in the sect, there was also a portion of entrance slots distributed to those from outside the sect. As for what they would need to give up in exchange, only the person who was responsible for this matter would know. Ling Han could not control these matters, so he merely spent his efforts in cultivation and alchemy. The demonic power source had also been expended more or less. Thankfully, Ling Han was the alchemy emperor on his own merits, and could use alchemy to support his cultivation. Though the effects were not as amazing as using the demonic power source, the advantage was that he could concoct alchemical pills on his own, and there was no limit to their number. Good news came one after another. Along with the endless supply of godly metal the Mo clan establishment delivered to him, his divine demon sword had finally been improved to level 4. Now, he needed level 4 godly metal to be able to continue improving the grade of the divine demon sword. Though the requirement had only been increased by a single grade, the price needed was definitely tenfold and above. Thus, Ling Han felt embarrassed to have the Mo clan establishment continue working for nothing. Instead, he planned to first pay back the debts that he had incurred this time round before he considered the matter of purchasing level 4 godly metal in bulk. He placed the hopes of easy money on this venture into the mystery realm. If he could get a few secret techniques, and take them out to be sold off, his profits would definitely be incredible. Besides, he had also reached the middle stage of the pinnacle level, while his power had advanced to 8 stars. This was extremely incredible. Who asked him to have the reincarnation tree, so he had enough time to accumulate comprehension of his cultivation level. The Rain Emperor, Ding Ping, Shui Yenyu, Hu Feiyun, and the others were also obviously improving. The most incredible one was still the Rain Emperor, who had shockingly achieved the peak stage of the medium extreme. Even if he had the assistance of Ling Han's alchemical pills, as well as the reincarnation tree to assist in comprehension of Tao, this was still extremely shocking. It was as if the Rain Emperor was naturally born from martial arts, and the higher his cultivation level was, the more frightening his explosive burst was. Meanwhile, Feng Peiyun, Ding Ping, and the others had just advanced into the medium extreme, and the gap between them and the Rain Emperor was becoming larger and larger. Shui Yenyu had also reached the peak stage of the high extreme. As for Hu Feiyun, since she was Empress Luan Xing's doppelganger, as long as she was willing to seriously cultivate, the rate at which she progressed was similarly shocking. She had already broken through to the peak stage of the consummate level, and could attempt to reach the pinnacle level. And the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm had finally opened as well. Chapter 1170, Death Valley. The Yellow Spring Mystery Realm was not on the Heavenly Wind Mountain. Instead, it was in the Death Valley that was 100,000 miles away. It was still within the territory of the Majestic Heavens sect, but had been a forbidden area since several millennia ago. One should know just from hearing the name. This was the Death Valley. Death was the only fate of those who came in. It wasn't until Venerable Trinity came here and suppressed the inauspicious air of this place using his supreme techniques that the historical site buried beneath finally reappeared, allowing people to enter, explore, and obtain treasures. However, this ancient site was no training grounds. It was designed specifically for cultivators to foray into. This place should have been the abode of an elite as it had frightening restrictions in place for protection. Venerable Trinity had indeed dispersed a part of the formation here, but could not completely do so. Hence, this place could only be visited once every 100 years because it was at such intervals that the might of the restrictions would be weakened the most. With Venerable Trinity in charge of opening the doors, entrance was finally and only possible then. Even so, it could only accommodate the power of the mountain river tier at most. If it was too strong, the restrictions would be triggered that would definitely not lead to a positive result. Even though Venerable Trinity had disposed of the inauspicious air of this place, it was filled with an eerie coldness. If it was not for the fact that the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm would be opened every 100 years, there would definitely be no one willing to come to this place. There were no flowers, plants, wild animals, nor birds. This was a completely barren place. A black aura was exuding from the whole valley. Its exact source could not be found, but it engulfed the whole valley, causing an urge to avoid it arise in people just from seeing it. No one wanted to come in contact with it. But now, this place was brimming with people. Some had still come here to try their luck even if they had not gotten entrance slots from the Majestic Heaven sect. Ling Han's eyes swept over the gathered masses, and he saw a familiar person that he himself had not seen many times. Sha Yuan. Involuntarily, his eyes frosted over, a sliver of killing intent seeping into his gaze. This man coveted the treasure in his possession, and had demanded it from him several times. After Ling Han had refused, the former had even sent out people to hunt him down and kill him. This enmity was one that Ling Han had never forgotten. Previously, even if Ling Han had wanted to take revenge, he could not find a chance. That was because Sha Yuan had reached the consummate level of Mountain River tier by himself, and remained at the academy and the great General Sha's residence all day. How was he supposed to kill him then? But now? There was practically no change in Sha Yuan's cultivation, but Ling Han had already advanced into the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier. Furthermore, this place was not Point Star City, but rather a mystery realm. Sha Yuan, you should repay your debt to me. So he is Sha Yuan? The Rain Emperor asked. He had heard Ling Han speak of how he had become enemies with Zhao Luan, Sha Yuan, and the others. Ling Han nodded, and replied, That's him. Let us brothers join forces and kill him together. Murong Qing declared with burning killing intent. Even the strongest of the three of them had just barely advanced into the high extreme. There was still quite a distance from Sha Yuan's level. Even if the three of them joined forces, they could not possibly have a chance of winning. Ling Han shook his head, and declared, He is mine. After entering into the mystery realm, we will move separately, the Rain Emperor said. Feng Peiyun nodded as well. They were all brave and courageous characters, filled with confidence in themselves. They had no intention to continue living under Ling Han's protection. Ling Han knew he could not convince them otherwise, so he simply nodded, and said, Be careful. He had given enough alchemical pills to his brothers, disciple, and Helian Tianyun. Furthermore, martial arts could not be improved with mere cultivation alone. Practical experience was similarly important. Han Lin, He Tao, Wuxia, and 4 other young men and women with high reputation walked over. All around them, people stepped back, giving way to this group of 6. They were the 6 great king tiers of the Mountain River tier in the Majestic Heaven sect. They were invincible in the Mountain River tier, and after entering the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm, they would be truly invincible because Sun Moon tier elites could not enter. Who would be a match for these 6 king tiers? Of course, now, it was 7 king tiers. Ling Han nodded, then clasped his hands, and respectfully said, Greetings, everyone. They had met once before to discuss the matter of opening the treasure trove. Because the treasure trove was in the deepest parts of the mystery realm, and there were various fated opportunities on the way there, they could not possibly abandon everything else and head directly there. Thus, they had agreed to move separately before reaching the treasure trove. Wuxia had swept away the embarrassment of his previous loss, and recovered his strong confidence. Even when facing Ling Han again, he did not avoid his gaze. That should be about it. Very soon, an elite descended from the skies as if he was a heavenly emperor. There was endless divine light trailing behind him as if the heavens themselves were moving for him. Venerable Trinity. It's venerable. Many people called out, incredible reverence on their faces. In this galaxy, elites of the Eternal River tier were the strongest existence. Naturally, they were like true gods in everyone's hearts. However, no one could distinctly see the actual features of this elite. Endless divine light entwined around his whole body, so it could not be distinguished whether he was tall or short, man or woman. If it were not for the fact that they knew that there was only one elite of the Eternal River tier here, they would not have been able to guess his identity at all. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. A great many other figures shot over, and they all stopped behind Venerable Trinity. Upon counting, there were a total of 24 figures. These were the 24 heavenly body tier elites of the Majestic Heaven sect. It looked like the operation today was extremely important if it caused all the elites of the Majestic Heaven sect to turn out in full strength. Ling Han's eyes swept over them. These 24 people did not disguise their faces, and could be clearly seen. However, aside from Wei Zicheng, Ling Han did not recognize anyone else, and merely memorized these people's faces. Venerable Trinity did not waste time on words, and directly stretched out his hands. He began to channel a powerful mystical power, sweeping aside the black qi of this place. Though the wind that was blowing out of the valley was still eerily cold, it was much better now. This was a necessary step. Otherwise, if one directly stepped in, all those below the heavenly body tier would be completely eliminated. Venerable Trinity entered the valley. The 24 elites of the heavenly body tier assisted him from the sidelines, dealing with some scattered black qi, and the others followed behind him. All those who had received an entrance slot had been given a jade pendant. Before, it had been completely unnoticeable, but at this moment, it was now exuding a soft light, forming a halo, and protecting their owner within. There were some here to take advantage of the commotion. Naturally, they could not possibly possess a jade pendant. They appeared very obvious here. But what was strange was that the great elites of the Majestic Heaven sect looked to have no intention of chasing them away. Instead, they allowed them to mingle in with the crowd, much to their confusion. If the Majestic Heaven sect had no plans to take control of this mystery realm, what was the point of distributing entrance slots, then? After they had opened the mystery realm, wouldn't it be fine if they just allowed others to enter directly? But those who were here for the first time found out why very soon. Ah, someone shouted in agony as he collapsed onto the ground. He was twitching all over, appearing to be in great suffering. In a mere short moment, all his movements stopped, and all the life signs had vanished from him. He had actually died. Ling Han was surprised had completely not discovered anything off. That person had just died for no conceivable reason. Since he had already cultivated to the immortal level, there was definitely no possibility of it being a strange illness, causing him to suddenly die. If there had to be anything unusual, that was that the dead man was a stowaway, and there was no flickering light of a jade pendant from him. Could it be that this was the reason? You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.